Chapter 131. Qing Dechao's small face turned deathly white when he heard Jun Dashao's words. His small face had turned even paler than before. Haha, third young master, this is the young master of the Qing family. It's inevitable that young master Jun is not familiar with him. Fong Bo Wen's eyes hadn't left Jun Xia since the moment he had entered the room. He had been observing his every movement, his every word, and his every expression. Qing Dechao, is it? Jun Moxie narrowed his eyes and looked at him. Qing Dechao. Qing Dechao's whole body trembled as he clenched his teeth and said, Young Master Jun, I've long heard of the Jun family's great reputation. Your father's reputation is like a thunderclap piercing through my ears. Qing Dechao's words were quite tricky. He was clearly ridiculing Jun Moxie for having been born without any proper upbringing. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. These words had not only exposed Jun Dashao's scars, but had also greatly offended the entire Jun family. The second prince started to sweat profusely. This young Master Cheng was simply a troublemaker. He had directly pushed the entire Jun family to the opposite side. Even if Jun Moxie was a debauchee, he wouldn't be able to understand the meaning behind his words. It was obvious that the gods and Buddhas weren't paying attention to the second prince's prayers. Hitman Jun snorted and said, So it turns out to be the young master of the Qing family. I've been disrespectful. Today is the first time that we've met. Please allow me to first greet you, haha. Jun Moxie's tone was heavy as he dragged out his words. The so-called pointing at a bald man and calling him a monk's name was probably nothing more than this. This was clearly a shrew cursing in the streets. Moreover, he was even greeting the young master's father. How can you be so shameless? The so-called Tianxiang City's #1 debauchee has opened everyone's eyes today. What does it mean to know someone by reputation? Qing Dechao was so angry that his hands and feet turned ice cold. His pale face turned ashen. In the face of Jun Moxie, who was born into a noble family, and whose personality was similar to that of a local ruffian, Qing Dechao's arrogance was simply useless. Moreover, Qing Dechao's family wasn't small, and could be considered as a tyrant, but in the end, it was still just a small Xian Qi family, and nothing more. Compared to the Jun family, which was a super prominent political and military family, Qing Dechao's family was simply not worth mentioning. This was also the main reason why the second prince and the others hadn't taken young Master Cheng's vow of exterminating the Jun family seriously. They were like frogs in a well looking at the sky. They only knew the circumference of their own well. How could they know the vastness of the world? In other words, no matter how hedonistic Jun Moxie was, no matter how unbearable. You're just an insignificant Qing Dechao. Young Master Qing doesn't have the qualifications to challenge Jun Xia. Moreover, you shouldn't have blurted out insults to your ancestors. You should have been exterminating your entire family. Young Master Cheng has always been arrogant. So, he blurted out those words. And now, Jun Moxie was making a naked counterattack, and wasn't even trying to hide it. If Qing Dechao were to continue his insults, then everyone could imagine that the Jun family's army would immediately descend upon the Qing family and exterminate them. Therefore, even if Jun Moxie didn't have any misgivings, Qing Dechao absolutely couldn't. However, this young Master Cheng wasn't a complete idiot. Therefore, even though he had been humiliated by Jun Moxie, he didn't dare to retaliate. Only the pretty boy was angered to the point that his whole body was trembling. The others looked on with cold eyes. However, they were secretly rejoicing in his misfortune. What kind of person is Jun Moxie? Even if he's a hedonistic debauchee, he's still the only descendant of the Jun family's third generation. How can a small Qing family afford to provoke him? This guy deliberately provoked Jun Moxie from the very beginning. Now that he's being treated like this, he's only seeking his own humiliation. At this moment, a fragrant wind lingered in the air. Then, a soft and beautiful voice sounded out, "Honored guests, Lady Yu has specially brought her sisters here to liven things up." Then, 5 or 6 women gracefully walked in. Each one of them was young and beautiful, and each of them was bashful and timid. The men in the room couldn't help but feel their blood boil. With the appearance of so many beautiful women, Jun Moxie's arrogant and despotic attitude disappeared. His eyes were fixated on the beautiful woman in the middle of the room, and his mouth was wide open. A thread of transparent silk was dripping from his mouth, but he didn't notice it. The person he was looking at was none other than Lady Yu. The reason why Jun Moxie had come to the Nichong Pavilion was because of her. Otherwise, why would he have agreed to the second prince's invitation when all three princes had invited him? Now that she had appeared in front of him, how could Jun Moxie let go of such an opportunity? Everyone looked at his pig-like appearance, and couldn't help but despise him in their hearts. What kind of demeanor was this? This Lady Yu, may be outstanding, but she's still a brothel girl, and will never be able to reach the next level. Could it be that this debauchee Jun wants to create a world-famous scandal? The second prince furrowed his brows. It was no secret that he had feelings for Yuer. However, Yuer had other thoughts in her heart. From beginning to end, she refused to leave his side. This made the second prince's heart itch. With his status, he naturally could not marry her. In fact, it was impossible for him to take her as a concubine. However, in his heart, he had long regarded Yuer as his forbidden descendant. A transparent pearl curtain separated the two sides of the room, and Lady Yu smiled gently as she walked over to the curtain and sat down. Her fingers plucked the strings, and the sound of the zither echoed in the room, adding a touch of elegance to the banquet. The dishes were quickly served, and the second prince and Jun Moxie didn't seem to hear anything. Instead, Jun Dashao's eyes were fixated on Lady Yu, who was playing the zither. The second prince and the others felt bored. Everyone already knew that Jun Xia was a debauchee, a complete debauchee. So, his actions were bound to be preposterous. This was reasonable and expected. But, no one had thought that this person would actually be so outrageous. Jun Xia drooled as he agreed with the second prince's comment. Although the major families in the capital have formed their own families, but if you look closely, you'll find that these families have already formed an offensive and defensive circle. Jun Xia nodded in agreement, not bad, not bad. Then, Fong Bo Wen, Lu Si Bo, and the others began to beat around the bush, and tried to demonstrate the second prince's strength and desire for the Jun family. Although their intentions weren't obvious, but the underlying meaning was clear enough for even a pig to understand. Moreover, Lu Sibo and Qing De Chao had given Jun Xia a vivid lesson about the second prince's courteous attitude. In fact, they had even taught him a very vivid lesson. In fact, he believed that even the textbook examples wouldn't be able to match up to them. Jun Dashao acted as if he was an expert, and listened attentively no matter what was being said. He actively participated in the discussion, and his attitude was extremely serious. Later on, he was the only one speaking non-stop, but the words he said didn't seem to match the donkey's lips or the horse's mouth, and left everyone speechless. When it came to political strategy, the art of governance, and how to benefit the people, Fong Bo Wen accidentally said, "The strength of the people and the strength of the country is not the same as the wealth of the people." This meant that everything needed to be supported by a strong financial force. Everyone agreed with this statement. However, this one sentence had caused Jun Xia to suddenly come up with many fallacies. His eloquent speech was endless. In the end, he had even deviated from the main topic and started to talk nonsense. Money, is a good thing. What Lord Fong said is very good, haha. Speaking of gambling, haha, this young master and Fatty Tang were afraid of disturbing the people, so we disguised ourselves and carefully entered the Golden Shuttle Casino. That day, we gambled thrillingly, and this young master's title of God of Gamblers also became famous that day. Henceforth, there would be no more opponents, it would be as lonely as snow. As the saying goes, it's lonely at the top. This was probably the meaning. Being invincible is indeed the loneliest. Jun Moxie proudly looked at everyone with disdain, and then put down his chopsticks, stood up, and put one foot on the chair, and gestured with his two hands. There are also fighting beasts, fighting snakes, fighting dogs, fighting cocks. Do you know, when the cocks are fighting, their feathers will stand up. June Moxie talked non-stop, and his spittle flew in all directions. Talking about this, he was a true expert. In the previous Mosie's memory, there was nothing special about him, but when it came to these debauches, he was definitely an expert. Who could stand up to this small test of his skill? Although that young Master Ching also had a bit of a debauchee aura, he was too focused on climbing up, and had long thrown that small path of debauches to the back of his mind. Even if he forced himself to do so, he was still too far away from June Dashao's level. How could he even be compared? For a moment, everyone looked askance, and stared at June Dashao's performance, as if they had been struck by lightning. Everyone was thinking in their hearts, just you and Tang Yuan, you two still need to disguise yourselves? With Fatty Tang's valiant physique, no matter how much he tried to disguise himself, anyone would be able to recognize him with a single glance. In fact, it would be extremely difficult to find a person with a bigger belly than him in the entire Xian continent. There was simply no one who could match him. With the two of you going, who would dare to win your money? Of course, he would become the god of gamblers, but we didn't seem to be talking about this just now. Then, where were we? Everyone felt dizzy. Oh my god, why did we go off topic again? Second Prince was already regretting to death in his heart. If he had known that this would be the result, why would he have spent so much effort? Such a coward actually took up so much of my energy. What is this? But I can't get anything out of it. There wasn't even a single accurate sentence, and this was the most depressing thing. Chapter 132. Old Man Fong was keenly aware that June Moxie always chose to interrupt the conversation when everyone was talking about the June family's strength, or when they were trying to recruit June Moxie. Then, June Moxie would suddenly come out of nowhere and spout nonsense, making everyone feel sick to their stomachs. Then, intentionally or unintentionally, the topic would pass. Although he's a debauchee, he's not an ordinary person. Interesting. Fong Bo Wen shook his head and thought to himself. It seems like the second prince is destined to return empty-handed today. However, was June Moxie's method instructed by his family, or did he decide on his own? This was a difficult question to answer. But looking at the current situation, it didn't matter if the June family didn't turn to the other two. As long as they didn't turn to the other two, then there wouldn't be a problem. Second prince, today, is there anything else besides drinking? We've had enough drinking, shouldn't we do something else? June Moxie's face was full of wretched smiles, making people want to step on his face. The most annoying thing about this guy was that he had changed the way he addressed the second prince 3 times. Second prince, second prince, second prince. It really made people feel like they were at home. Originally, there were other programs, but after seeing June Moxie's behavior, the second prince had already arranged for it to be cancelled. And it's better to part ways with this guy as soon as possible. In less than a meal's time, he was so angry that he was about to vomit blood, so depressed that he was speechless, and despised him to the point that his brain short-circuited. Seeing that everyone had finally given up on him, June Moxie secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He stood up with a grin and waddled over to Lady Yu'er, who was playing the zither behind the curtain. June Moxie's main purpose for coming here was her. How could he let her go? A little girl like you dares to say that you want to exterminate my June family? Thinking back to Lady Yu'er's bitter hatred towards him and the June family that night, June Imosie's heart was filled with dread. This woman was not only witty, but she was also highly skilled in martial arts. Although it seemed like she was relying on the second prince, it was clear that she had not completely thrown herself into the second prince's arms. A woman who could protect her chastity in front of a prince? This statement seemed a little ridiculous, but from this point, it could be seen that this woman's intentions were not small. June Moxie did not doubt that this woman had ulterior motives. He even suspected that there was a mysterious force behind this woman. Therefore, he might have to make a deal today that would alert the enemy. Only by sticking your head out would you have a target. Who would have the patience to compete with an enemy who was hiding in the dark? The June family's strength was slowly developing at the moment. So, they needed to have some goals in order to grow faster. He and the June family would be in a very passive position if he allowed her to continue to lie dormant and continue to spy on the June family's weakness. But, if he were to kill her, then he would directly cut off this line of communication. This would make the enemy completely hidden in the dark, and the situation would become even more unfavorable. Lady Yu is very beautiful, he. June Moxie did not hide his eyes as he sized up Yu suddenly felt an indescribable discomfort throughout her body. Lang looked at him and said, "Young Master June, please conduct yourself with dignity." No need. This young master's greatest advantage is that his body is as light as a swallow. Tang Yuan, that fatty, is the one who should conduct himself with dignity. June Moxie laughed as he lifted the curtain and rushed in. Young Master June, you may be a prostitute, but she sells her skills and not her body. Please understand. Yu said in a cold voice. If I don't pay after I'm done, then it won't count as a sale. This young master thanks you for your kind reminder. June Dashao continued to move closer to Yu with a calm face. By now, anyone could see that this debauchee June Moxie had taken a fancy to Lady Yu and it was very likely that he would force himself on her, or even perform a reality show. This was not a rare occurrence for the famous debauchee of the June family. But the biggest question was, who was Lady Yu? The host of this banquet, the second prince, had taken a fancy to her. Unfortunately, June Moxie did not know about this matter, and the second prince could not make this matter public. This was going to be a big deal. No one had expected that this kind of thing would happen when they had come out for a meal with the June family's third young master, whom they had never met in 100 years. Is he still the son of an aristocratic family? What is this? If Yu rashly refuses this debauchee, then this guy will immediately retaliate. How can a trivial Ni Chong pavilion withstand the June family's revenge? But if we don't refuse, are we going to let this bastard take advantage of us? Everyone suddenly looked at each other in dismay, not knowing what to do at this moment. The second prince's face sank as he said, "Third young master, Lady Yu is a master of music theory, and has always been noble and pure. This is the first time we've met, so please don't make things difficult for this lady." The way he addressed the second prince had changed from younger brother to third young master. Difficult? How can it be difficult? What kind of noble and pure business do you think she is? Ha, if this young master doesn't make things difficult for her, then what will she eat and drink? June Mo Xie had obviously drunk too much, and hadn't heard anything. Instead, he was looking at Lady Yu behind the curtain with great interest. Lady Yu fiercely glared at him, "Young Master June, it's better to treat a woman like a gentleman." Gentleman? Ha, this is a brothel. Do you know what a brothel is? A brothel. Do you understand? You want to look for a gentleman in a brothel? What a joke. A brothel is a place for hoodlums. This young master has never been a gentleman, I'm a hoodlum. So what? June Moxie shouted proudly, as if he was proud of his hoodlum status. Yuer was angered to the point she gritted her teeth tightly, and she was practically unable to restrain her temper and wanted to kill this profligate young master on the spot. Truly too hateful. With your character, even if all the men in this world were to die, this young lady still wouldn't take a fancy to you. But when she saw the second prince's ashen face through the bead curtain, an idea came to her mind. "Second master, please save me." Lady Yu ran out of the curtain in a panic, and ran towards the second prince. Although she was staggering, her speed was extremely fast. She believed that even an ordinary 9th-level master would not be able to stop her. But she didn't expect that June Mo Xie's speed would suddenly increase as well. In a flash, he opened his arms wide and pulled a delicate body into his embrace. Laughing loudly, he said, "Beauties always say one thing but mean another. You say you don't want it, but you still take the initiative to throw yourself into my arms." Lady Yu didn't expect that the rumored June Moxie, whose xian qi had been crippled, would be able to catch her. Her previous flash seemed ordinary, but in fact, she had used a very high level of agility. But June Moxie seemed to have a bright mind, and in the moment of her flash, he was already standing in front of her, and the two almost bumped into each other. In the eyes of an outsider, it was as if she had thrown herself into his arms. Was it a coincidence? But isn't it too much of a coincidence? Lady Yu was so ashamed and angry that she almost fainted. Everyone looked at each other in disbelief. In public and in front of a prince, what kind of behavior was this? June Moxie! Let go of Lady Yu! Qing De Chao roared and rushed forward. Lady Yu took the opportunity to struggle free from June Moxie's embrace. Her beautiful eyes were filled with tears of shame and anger, and she didn't even think about it as she waved her palm towards June Moxie's face. In Lady Yu's mind, with her martial arts cultivation, and the fact that June Moxie didn't have any Xian Qi in his body, there was no way that she wouldn't be able to hit him. Paw! A crisp sound of a slap resounded, and everyone was stunned. Lady Yu's slap had not only failed to land on June Xia, but had instead landed a solid slap on her face. Suddenly, a red handprint could be seen on her snow-white face, swelling up at a speed visible to the naked eye, and her hair was also disheveled. For a moment, she didn't know how to react, and fell to the ground in a daze. Smelly whore, you only know how to be obedient, you have no professional ethics. You dare to hit me? You've really gone against the heavens. June Moxie angrily cursed as he rushed forward in a threatening manner. He lifted his foot to kick again, but was stopped by a man who stood in front of him. It was Qing De Chao. Third young Master June, why are you so angry with a mere brothel girl? Qing De Chao's face had become somewhat distorted, and it seemed that June Moxie was becoming more and more unpleasant to the eye. Although he was trying to dissuade June Moxie, his heart was itching to strangle him. Get lost! I'm going to beat this little whore to death today. She dares to pretend to be virtuous in front of me. She must be blind. June Moxie's anger soared to the heavens as he shouted. June Moxie, you must understand. Today is the second prince's banquet, and His Royal Highness is sitting nearby. Don't tell me that you don't want to give His Royal Highness face. Chapter 133. Don't be presumptuous. Miss Yu is. Qing De Chao suddenly felt a chill run down his spine, and he immediately shut his mouth. Is? What is she? June Moxie laughed presumptuously as the corners of his mouth twitched. She's selling her skills in a brothel, but not her body? Who is she trying to fool? I'm going to play with her today. She's pretending to be a virgin in front of me even though she's in a brothel. The reputation of a noble family has been ruined by people like you. Qing De Chao said in a tone of infinite contempt, June Xia, I loathe and despise you to the extreme. Qing De Chao suddenly felt a sense of pride at this moment. In the past, people had always said that he was a disgrace to the aristocratic family. But today, compared to June Moxie, he felt as if he was shining brightly. Cheng De Fu *K. Who do you think you are? Do you think you're qualified to talk about me? Do you believe that I won't make your Qing family disappear in an instant if you speak another word? June Xia was extremely savage. He raised his neck and squinted his eyes. Go back to your mother's house and drink milk. Qing De Chao's hands trembled as he pointed at June Moxie. His eyes turned red as he pressed his hand on the hilt of his sword. Clang! The sword was unsheathed by 3 inches, and a cold light radiated in all directions. June Moxie. The second prince stood up with a sullen face. You're drunk. You'd better go back to your residence. I haven't drunk much wine, so how can I be drunk? June Moxie snorted as he stiffened his neck. He didn't buy it. I'm waiting for this sissy to pull out his sword and cut me in half. I said you're drunk, so you're drunk, the second prince said in a stern voice. He finally couldn't hold back any longer. Fong Bo-wen hastily stepped forward, and gently pressed the second prince's hand. June Moxie raised his eyes, and the two of them looked at each other in the air. They stared at each other for a while, and then the corners of their mouths crooked as they smiled. Since the second prince says that I'm drunk, then I'm drunk. Hee hee. I haven't even touched a drop of wine and I'm already drunk. Ha ha ha. What a joke. Laughing out loud, he picked up a wine cup and smashed it beside Lady Yu. The crisp sound caused everyone to look over, and their eyebrows twitched. June Moxie pointed a finger at Lady Yu and said fiercely, "Little slut, with His Second Highness here today, I will let you go for the time being. However, I will come and settle the score with you at any time." Humph. Then, he turned his head, and smiled evilly as he approached Qing De Chao. Then, he slowly extended his hand, and patted Qing De Chao's face with two crisp and clear sounds. June Xia smiled and said, "Do you want to kill me? You really want to, don't you?" Ha ha ha, Qing De Chao, you can't kill someone if you draw your sword halfway. You, be more obedient in the future, understand? He turned his head, and put on a fake smile. Then, he waved his hand as if he was waving away a speck of dust in front of his eyes. Then, he turned around and swaggered away. The prince had invited him to a banquet, and he had made a scene there. He had taken advantage of others, and then he had beaten them. Then, the prince had come forward to plead for leniency, and he had threatened to retaliate. He had beaten the prince, and had cursed Qing De Chao. His words had been rude and vulgar. June Moxie could be said to be extremely arrogant today, and he had truly lived up to his reputation as Tian Xiang's #1 debauchee. June Moxie went downstairs, and entered the palanquin. Surprisingly, there were two other black-clothed men hidden inside the palanquin. June Moxie spoke in a low and urgent tone, "After I leave, you must pay close attention to the movements of the Ni Chang Pavilion. After the second prince and the others leave, one of you will be responsible for monitoring the communication birds in the sky, and the other will pay attention to the people coming in and out of the pavilion. You must not slack off." The two men nodded in unison. The palanquin shook, and the young Master June returned home. Although he hadn't gained much from this trip, it could be said that he had made a splendid achievement. On the one hand, he had made the second prince suffer a loss, and on the other hand, he had humiliated Lady Yu. This trip had definitely not been in vain. June Moxie knew that although Lady Yu was residing in the Ni Chang Pavilion, she wasn't a prostitute. However, the words that June Moxie had spoken to her were something that even a professional prostitute wouldn't be able to tolerate, let alone a Xian Qi expert in disguise. Not to mention the fact that this impersonator was a virgin. Therefore, June Moxie was certain that Lady Yu would definitely make a move. This was exactly what June Moxie was hoping for. The only advantage that he had was that June Moxie had overheard the conversation between Lady Yu and Lord Lu, and had already determined the identity of this enemy. However, Lady Yu didn't know that June Moxie had already locked onto her. Therefore, as long as she was still a person and not a pile of dirt, she would certainly want to retaliate after suffering such humiliation. The third advantage was that the humiliation of Lady Yu had already sowed the seeds of division between the second prince and Lady Yu. The second prince was indecisive and lacked a majestic aura, which was why Lady Yu was so disappointed in him. If a man couldn't even protect the woman he wanted to pursue, then what kind of man could he be? Especially since this man clearly had the power to protect her, but didn't do anything. This was even more disappointing. If June Moxie had been in the second prince's shoes, he would have surely shouted, "This is my woman. First, we have to settle the matter." However, the second prince didn't dare to do so, at least he didn't dare to shout it out loud. This was why June Moxie looked down on him. Wealth, glory, and the status of a prince, were they really that important? In fact, this was also the blind spot of the hitman June. Not every man would fly into a rage for a woman, and not everyone would be indifferent to wealth, glory, and splendor. In fact, most people in this world wouldn't be able to escape. Especially a prince who had the potential to become a prince. As for his actions today, although it was a bit excessive for a woman like Lady Yu, but June Moxie didn't feel the least bit apologetic in his heart. When dealing with an enemy, one naturally has to resort to extreme measures. Since you plan to destroy my family, and even scheme to deal with me, then shouldn't I have scolded you? This young master's conscience is clear. Gaga, Lady Yuka watched as June Moxie's palanquin gradually disappeared into the distance, and her tender body couldn't help but tremble. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her eyes were filled with a murderous look. The second prince walked up to her, but before he could say anything, she snorted heavily, turned around, and walked away. The second prince stood there in a daze, his hands still in the same position as before, and the expression on his face fluctuated. Who would have thought that the purpose of this banquet was to recruit June Moxie, but June Moxie would actually be so arrogant. He didn't even give face to a dignified prince. June Moxie swaggered off, and completely betrayed the second prince's good intentions. Moreover, he didn't even try to hide it. It was equivalent to breaking off relations with the second prince. This was tantamount to giving the second prince a resounding slap in the face. Ever since the second prince was born, this was the first time he'd been humiliated in such a way. His hatred for June Moxie had reached its peak. He stood there quietly, motionless, and the other three people didn't even dare to breathe loudly. After a long time, the sky turned dark, and the second prince finally flicked his sleeves, and said in a low voice, "Let's go." Ching Dechao came forward, and said, "Your Highness, this June Moxie was so rude today. Should I send 2 men to teach him a lesson? I'll help your Highness vent his anger, even if it means taking his life." "Are you a pig?" The second prince suddenly turned his head, his eyes were bloodshot. "He knows that I can't touch him. That's why he dared to be so domineering today. But, it's also a fact that I don't dare to touch him. Otherwise, how would June Moxie have the guts to contradict me? Break off relations today, and teach him a lesson tomorrow? Assassinate him? Is your brain filled with tofu dregs? Don't talk about whether or not you have the ability to touch him. Even if June Moxie were to fall on the road, we would be the biggest suspects." June Zhantian had washed the capital with blood a few days ago, and he had clearly expressed his attitude. "Don't tell me that you'll only be happy if that old man washes my palace with blood? Are you thinking that I'm not annoying enough?" His attempt at flattery had backfired, and he was kicked away. Ching Dechao awkwardly coughed twice, and then retracted his head, and didn't say another word. However, he was secretly cursing in his heart. "You're a dignified prince, and yet you're being scolded by your own minister's grandson like a turtle's grandson. But, you don't even dare to vent your anger on him. Instead, you vent your anger on me. This must be June Zhantian's intention," Fang Bowen slowly said as he stroked his beard. June Moxie's actions today were clearly deliberate. In other words, he had already prepared to break off relations with your Highness before he came here. Why do you say that?" the second prince asked as he pondered over it. The June family has always been unwilling to participate in the nation's politics. They've always been immersed in the military, and they've always kept a distance from the three princes. They've always stood on the sidelines, and it's clear that they won't participate in these muddy waters. This is a good strategy to protect their lives. However, June Zhantian had gathered his troops in the capital a few days ago, and massacred the minister's residences. This shows that the June family is extremely powerful. And, it doesn't matter which of the three princes obtains this power, they'll be able to defeat the other two princes, and take over the nation. Since we can see this, the other two princes must have seen it as well. Therefore, I'm afraid that all three princes have the same idea. However, June Zhantian isn't willing to bet on any one of them, and he has no intention of participating. Even if he reveals the June family's strength, he would rather provoke His Majesty than participate. Under these circumstances, there's only one way to maintain his strength and get out of these muddy waters. The second prince gradually understood. Break off relations with me? No. It should be to break off relations with all three princes. After revealing such a strong strength, this is the only way to reassure His Majesty. At least, before June Zhantian passes away, the June family will not fall. In other words, of the three princes who invited June Moxie to the banquet today, no matter which one June Moxie went to, they all fell out with each other. Your Highness, you're just a little more unlucky than the other two princes. Coincidentally, June Moxie chose to come to our side. Kill the chicken to warn the monkeys. The second prince suddenly understood. He couldn't help but grit his teeth. June Moxie, that son of a bitch, he actually treated this prince like a chicken. Chapter 134. But this way, the other two princes will have some misgivings and won't dare to invite the June family again. This way, the June family will be able to enjoy a period of peace. In my opinion, this plan was June Gentian's idea. However, there is still a very troublesome problem that makes me feel helpless. Fong Bo-wen frowned and sighed. Please enlighten me. The second prince seemed to have guessed what he was going to say, and his face became even more gloomy. Your Highness also mentioned this matter earlier. Fong Bo-wen sighed. In this way, everyone will know that June Xia and Your Highness have a falling out. Moreover, he was arrogant and despotic in front of everyone, not giving Your Highness any face. If June Xia is harmed during this period of time, or if someone, then the biggest suspect will undoubtedly be Your Highness. And I believe that the first and third princes will not let go of this opportunity to frame you. What are you talking about? The second prince suddenly became angry. Do I still have to send people to protect him after being humiliated by him? That depends on Your Highness's choice. If Your Highness is not afraid of June Gentian, then you don't have to worry about him. Fong Bo-wen said slowly. The second prince was speechless. Not afraid? That was a lie. Just a few days ago, over 1,000 heads fell to the ground at the same time. June Gentian's anger had caused him to clear almost a third of the imperial court. If he was forced into a corner, it would not be impossible for him to wreak havoc in the royal palace. Bastard! Bastard! The second prince raised his leg and kicked the pebble in front of him far away, as if that pebble was June Xia. So much trouble because of a simple meal? The second prince was indignant. Some people really can't be provoked. This June Moxie is the legendary Jinx. Just like me, not only did I lose face, I didn't get anything, and because of June Xia, I even offended Lady Yu. All of this is really, why bother? On the roof of the Ni Chong Pavilion, a delicate figure watched the second prince and his entourage leave. Her pretty face was as cold as ice. In that kind of situation, you actually still had misgivings and didn't step forward bravely. After I was humiliated by June Xia, you only said a few words in a calm and indifferent manner. You're obviously afraid that I'll affect your reputation. Since that's the case, why did you provoke me in the first place? How could I, Chu Linyue, be a woman in the dark for my entire life? A cold light flashed in Lady Yu's eyes as she gritted her teeth. Since you're afraid of June Gentian's military forces, then do you think I'll force you to act? June Moxie. Today, I will make sure that you die without a burial ground for such a great humiliation. As the night deepened, Lady Yu loosened her grip and a messenger pigeon flew up into the sky. In the darkness of the distance, a black silhouette quietly flew out like a bolt of lightning. After a few feet, the silhouette suddenly jumped onto the roof with a schwa sound, and cast a large black net over the roof. In fact, it almost blended in with the darkness of the night. The messenger pigeon that had just taken off fell into the net in the blink of an eye. The black-robed man stooped, quickly turned around, and disappeared into the darkness. Late at night, in the second prince's residence, a black messenger pigeon spread its wings and flew into the night sky, disappearing in the blink of an eye. In front of the window, Qing De Chao grinned and muttered, June Moxie, I don't care if you're a descendant of the June family, but since you dared to insult me today, you shouldn't exist in this world anymore. If I kill you today, everyone will think that it was the work of the three princes. Who will suspect my Qing family? Moreover, the one who killed you isn't a member of my Qing family, he. As the saying goes, even a wise man will make a mistake. Moreover, June Dashao is only the king of assassins, he's not a wise man. June Moxie had overlooked one thing. He hadn't expected that the young master of the Qing family would be so narrow-minded. He had a foothold at the second prince's side, and had an illustrious family background. How will everything develop in the future? June Moxie was sitting unsteadily in the palanquin. He was very depressed. He had always been accustomed to walking on his feet. So, sitting in such a high-class thing was simply torture for him. Sitting in a palanquin wasn't a good thing for a king of assassins like him. The palanquin trembled and fluctuated between high and low. It was really hard for these ancient people. Sitting in a palanquin was a symbol of status. It seemed that all the civil officials, regardless of whether they were loyal or corrupt, wouldn't be able to walk without a palanquin. What's so good about this broken thing? Damn, what if they had high blood pressure or heart disease? Jun Dashao felt that sitting in a palanquin was a shortcut to the king of hell. He endured for a while, hoping to arrive at the Jun family's residence. But the speed of the palanquin was really too slow. After swaying for a long time, they still hadn't arrived. Jun Dashao finally couldn't help but order the palanquin to stop. Suddenly, a white thing jumped into the palanquin with a whoosh sound. It was excitedly whining and a soft little head burrowed into his arms. Jun Moxie was quick to react. He grabbed it by the neck and lifted it up in front of him. It was Duga Xiaoyi's high-rank Xian beast, the cub of the iron-winged leopard. Looking at the small body in his hands, Jun Moxie felt it was incredible. It's so small, how can it be so fast? How fast will it be when it grows up? He had underestimated this little thing before. It was indeed a high-rank Xian beast. Junior Leopard was lifted up by Jun Imo Xia by the back of its neck, and its limbs were suddenly unable to move. It whimpered as it looked at Jun Imo Xia with a pair of beautiful big eyes. It couldn't understand why this human, who it had a very good impression of, was so rude to it every time. Seeing it, Jun Moxie instantly thought that Duga Xiaoyi was probably not far away. Otherwise, how could this little guy smell his scent? Jun Imo Xia extended his finger and pointed at Junior Leopard's soft little nose. Then, he fiercely whispered, "Please, you don't need to follow me anymore. If you continue to follow me, then that fierce master of yours will cause trouble for me. Then, her whole family will cause trouble for me. Do you understand? Please do as you please." Originally, he intended to scare Junior Leopard away. Somehow, it turned into a plea for mercy. Although the cub was a high-rank Xian beast and understood human nature, it didn't seem to understand Jun Moxie's profound and meaningful words. It tilted its head and looked at Jun Dashao in confusion. With a twist of its waist, it struggled out of his hands and whined happily. Jun Dashao saw that there was a chance. Was the little thing willing to leave? Unexpectedly, the little thing burrowed into his arms with a schwat sound. It greedily breathed in and out. Its little head arched back and forth, resting comfortably on his chest. Its rosy little mouth opened and yawned. Its beautiful big eyes slowly narrowed. It was actually about to fall asleep, so it didn't want to leave. It just felt that my hands weren't as comfortable as my chest. Bah, how could I say this? I'm a man, what's so comfortable about my chest? I'm so depressed. Little White, where did you go, Little White? Little White. A clear and melodious voice came from outside. It sounded very anxious and there were some signs that it was about to cry. Duga Xiaoyi had always treated this little thing as a treasure. Now that it suddenly disappeared, it was natural that her mind would be in a mess. Jun Moxie sighed. What was fate? Wasn't this the legendary fate? But it seemed that this was an ill-fated fate. Even if he couldn't meet a person, meeting a cub would be the same. A Lengleng's voice came from the front of the sedan chair, "The person inside, please come out." The voice was indifferent, with a sense of loneliness and weariness. It turned out to be Yi Gahan. With his eyesight as an expert, Tian Xian could naturally see that Jun Moxie had suddenly jumped into Jun Moxie's sedan chair at an extremely high speed without any warning. Although there was no reason for the little thing to do so, there was no doubt that it had entered the sedan chair. After a long while, Jun Moxie's lazy and helpless voice came out, "I say, there are millions of people in Tianxiang City. Why do I always meet you guys every time I come out? Is it really fate that brings us together? Or is it that enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road?" As soon as he spoke, the two people outside shouted at the same time, "June Moxie." Although the two people spoke at the same time, the emotions they wanted to express were as different as heaven and earth. Yi Gahan's voice was filled with extreme disdain and anger. As for Dugu Xiaoyi's voice, it was filled with joy. It turned out that Dugu Xiaoyi had excitedly followed Princess Raimu to the imperial palace. But after a few days, she didn't see anyone from her family coming to pick her up. It must be known that Xiaoyi was the Dugu family's most favored young lady. Seeing that there was no movement from her family for a few days, she was naturally surprised. So, she bid farewell to Princess Raimu and requested to return home. Raimu naturally tried to persuade her to stay. Although Xiaoyi was innocent, she was also exceptionally intelligent. She naturally sensed that something was wrong. After asking around, she found out that her own family had caused a ruckus at the June family because of her. Suddenly, her temper flared up. Regardless of the fact that it was already late at night, she clamored to leave the palace and return home. Princess Raimu had no choice but to ask Yi Gahan to escort Dugu Xiaoyi home in order to be safe. Who would have thought that little white, who was in Dugu Xiaoyi's bosom, would suddenly come out of her bosom with a schwat sound. Then, it sniffed its nose in all directions. Then, it jumped out of the little girl's palanquin and disappeared without a trace. Dugu Xiaoyi was very anxious. So, she got out of the palanquin to look for it. When she heard June Moxie's voice, she immediately understood that it was him. No wonder Little White had such a big reaction. She remembered that Little White liked him very much. So, it wasn't surprising that such a situation had occurred. June Moxie had a helpless look on his face as he carried the little guy out of the palanquin. When Dugu Xiaoyi saw him, she thought about the ruckus between the two families during this period of time. She felt an indescribable sense of shyness. She saw Little White lying comfortably in June Dashao's bosom. Unexpectedly, it didn't open its eyes to look at its owner. It was as if June Dashao's bosom was the most comfortable place in the world. Naturally, she couldn't help but feel a little jealous. But, when she saw June Moxie's tired appearance, she felt an inexplicable pain in her heart. For a moment, all kinds of subtle feelings welled up in her heart. She didn't know what to say. For Dugu Xiaoyi, who dared to say and do what she wanted, this was a very rare thing. Chapter 135. It's fate that brings us together. Miss Dugu, we meet again. June Moxie chuckled and said casually. His tone and expression were the same as when they first met at the 1,000 Gold Hall. However, young Master June had never expected that these words of his would carry a complicated meaning to Dugu Xiaoyi's ears, even though they weren't much different from the words he had said back then. Fate? He said that we're fated to meet. Sigh, so what if we're fated? What's the use of running into each other every day? Aren't the two great families still against it? Dugu Xiaoyi's joy when she heard June Moxie's voice turned into faint bitterness. Just like today, if it weren't for Little White, I wouldn't have been able to see you again. Are we not fated to meet again? Dugu Xiaoyi wasn't an old monster who had lived 2 lives. She was only 16 years old, the same age as Mo Xia. She was just a young and innocent girl in the prime of her life. She wasn't able to understand such subtle things as love at her age. However, she had often heard that June Mo Xia was a debauchee, and had committed many evil deeds. So, she had always felt disgusted with him. So, she would punish him whenever she encountered him. That was all. But ever since she met June Moxie outside the 1,000 Gold Hall, she felt that although this good-for-nothing was glib, the way he handled things was very organized, and he had a sense of propriety. It was as if he was a completely different person from the June Moxie she'd met before. That encounter had greatly aroused Dugu Xiaoyi's curiosity. Moreover, June Moxie had pretended to be a pig to eat a tiger, and Dugu Xiaoyi had been very satisfied with his methods. Later, when she met June Moxie again in the Book of Heavenly Weapons, and saw June Moxie acting like a pig to eat a tiger, she couldn't help but feel disgusted. But later, she realized that she had misunderstood him again. The word again immediately caused Dugu Xiaoyi's state of mind to become very subtle. I have misunderstood him for so many years. I have bullied him for so many years, but he has never defended himself. Moreover, he would always go along with me and let me bully him. If his ability was really low, then it would make sense. But he is obviously very smart. I did not expect to misunderstand him again. Dugu Xiaoyi's heart was filled with mixed feelings as she thought about this. Although Jun Imo Xia had used some tricks to swindle the meteoric iron from her hands, and her heart was filled with indignation, but on second thought, perhaps it was because the meteoric iron was too important that he had swindled it from her hands. Or perhaps his resourcefulness were his true colors. Why is it so difficult to see his face? Why does he have to deliberately hide himself? This was naturally Xiaoyi's conclusion after the incident. She had always been a proud and arrogant girl, but she was bullied by a person she had bullied many times before. The reason was that she had misjudged him, and he had pretended to be a pig to eat a tiger. It was inevitable that she felt especially bad. Then, she thought about how she had misunderstood him for so many years, and how she had bullied him so many times, but he didn't seem to care at all. Thinking about this, she suddenly felt that something was wrong. She went home and cried. As she cried, she recalled her experiences over the years, and the situation of the Jun family. She felt that Jun Moxie had not been easy all these years, and her heart ached faintly. As for telling her father that she had been bullied by Jun Moxie, it was nothing more than a little girl who had been wronged and acted like a spoiled child. Who knew that as soon as she said it, she would receive the news that Jun Moxie's life and death was unknown. It was as if her heart had been hit by a heavy hammer. She had misunderstood him for so many years, and she hadn't had the chance to apologize to him. Could it be that he had died just like that? Thinking about this, Dugu Xiaoyi blamed herself even more. Once a child had something on her mind, she didn't know how to hide it, and naturally, she couldn't eat anymore. After thinking about this for many days, she had slowly raised the position of Jun Moxie in her heart to a very high level. For this matter, Dugu Xiaoyi had inquired about the Jun family from her grandfather. After learning that the Jun family was in turmoil, Dugu Xiaoyi naturally found an excuse for Jun Moxie's debauchery. It turned out that the Jun family was in such a dangerous situation. It turned out that he did not hesitate to sully his reputation for the sake of the family, and endured humiliation for the sake of the family. It must have been hard on him. He is only about the same age as me, but he has endured so much. No wonder there was such a big contrast between the few times I saw him. Such a responsible man who is willing to sacrifice for the family. Then, she found out that Jun Moxie was injured in order to save the princess, and that his life and death were unknown. Such a chivalrous heart. Thus, in Dugu Xiaoyi's heart, Jun Moxie had transformed from a debauchee to a responsible young master, an elegant and chivalrous young master. Such a transformation could be said to have turned the world upside down, and the blue sea into mulberry fields. A young girl's heart, when looking at someone, would naturally think of that person's actions as noble, great, and chivalrous. Thus, when Dugu Xiaoyi was worried about Jun Moxie, she had already wishfully vindicated Jun Moxie in her heart. Later, when she suddenly heard Jun Moxie's voice in the magnificent jewel hall, the joy that came from the bottom of her heart could not be described in words. It was as if she had suddenly regained a lost treasure. Then, when her own pet Little White unexpectedly became intimate with Jun Moxie, the little girl was even happier. One must know that Little White, besides herself, did not even look at anyone else, but it was so intimate with that bad guy. What did this mean? Originally, until this time, Dugu Xiaoyi still could not figure out what kind of feelings she had for Jun Moxie. But then, when her father and brother went to cause trouble for Jun Moxie, and after understanding the whole story, Dugu Xiaoyi asked herself for the first time in her heart, did I really fall for that bad guy? Did I really fall for him? Is this how it feels to fall for someone? This kind of feeling is really, very wonderful. So these past few days, although she was angry at her family and her best sister for rashly interfering in her affairs, it was undeniable that there was a deep fear in her heart, as well as a little bit of apprehension and a little bit of shame. Although they did not meet, but later on, when she thought of June Moxie, she would think that she might have fallen for him. Thinking of this, her heart would thump, and her face would turn red. Looking forward to the next reunion, the feelings of a young girl were hard to fathom, like a poem, like a dream, and filled with endless fantasies. Although Dugu Xiaoyi was born into a noble family, it would not be an exaggeration to say that she was a proud daughter of the heavens, but this kind of girl's heart was no different from that of an ordinary farmer's daughter. It could be said that this inexplicable relationship had been forcefully forced out under pressure and interference from many sides. If only Princess Raimu had not made wild guesses before, if only the Dugu family had not gone to the June family to make a fuss, and gradually dealt with this matter, then June Moxie would at most be a good playmate in Dugu Xiaoyi's heart, a very interesting and reliable person. That was all. In the end, this interesting playmate would definitely become a passerby or a memory in her life as he grew older. But with so many sides involved, Dugu Xiaoyi suddenly became more and more obsessed with this matter. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that June Moxie was unusually hard to come by. Instead, she was trapped in a cocoon of her own making. At this moment, when she heard June Moxie's voice, Dugu Xiaoyi's heart immediately throbbed, as if she had done something shameful. When she saw June Moxie appear in front of her, for some reason, Dugu Xiaoyi did not know what she was thinking, but her face was burning. In that instant, the first thought that came into her mind was actually to turn around and run. Could it be that I and him are really fated? Oh my, this is so embarrassing. Dugu Xiaoyi covered her hot and pretty face with her hands. June family's little thief, you really have a good method. You have opened my eyes. For the sake of Miss Dugu, you are really unscrupulous. Yi Guhan Lengleng looked at him. Although she did not know what method June Moxie had used to make Dugu Xiaoyi's iron-winged panther so close to him, but it was undeniable that this was definitely a killer move against Dugu Xiaoyi. It would not be an exaggeration to say that it was a killer move. It could be said that Dugu Xiaoyi's love for Little White was obvious to all. Now that Little White was so close to June Moxie, there was no doubt that Dugu Xiaoyi would be under the threat of June Moxie at any time. This was a very dangerous situation. High-level Xian beasts would not easily have any good feelings towards outsiders other than their own masters. Although Yi Guhan did not understand the mystery behind this, and felt that it was unimaginable, he had already preconceived that June Moxie must have used some shameful method on this Xian beast cub. Otherwise, how could this be? If high-level Xian beasts are so close to a human, and such an unbearable debauchee, then Xian beasts are not so rare. What? Good method? What good method? June Moxie was somewhat depressed. Who did I provoke this time? Is there a need for all of you to be so hostile the moment you see me? In all honesty, I didn't do anything at all. It was clearly that little lecher who jumped into my arms the moment he saw me. Although I'm suave, handsome, and outstanding, these are all facts, but how could I have fallen for such a little thing? This young master is the real, honest victim, okay? June family thief, why haven't you returned the Xian beast cub to Miss Dugu? Yi Guhan was very glad that he was the one who escorted Dugu Xiaoyi. Otherwise, Dugu Xiaoyi would not have been able to escape June Moxie's trap tonight without his escort. If something unspeakable happened between the two of them, then this matter would be very serious. No, this little thief's plot must be stopped. I say. Yi Guhan, aren't you being too nosy? Just protect your princess, why are you poking your nose into other people's business? Who do you think you are? What right do you have to stick your nose into the matter between me and the little girl? June Moxie had come down to return the little Xian beast, but Yi Guhan's words had suddenly made him feel sick of it. The following words were free. Well, let me say a few words here. Regarding this chapter of Dugu Xiaoyi's problem, he didn't intend to explain it. But recently, many people have been asking this question in the book review section: why did Dugu Xiaoyi take a fancy to June Moxie? Why? This question has been asked since before the book was published. Moreover, many of the brothers were really puzzled and felt that it was a bit abrupt. There were also some people who, or perhaps it could be said that they added fuel to the fire. Slowly, this problem actually developed into a sharp weapon to attack the evil monarch. Well, it seems that I have no choice but to be long-winded. Then let's be long-winded. That's why there is this chapter, 9 Turns of a Girl's Heart. Brothers and sisters, please don't blame me. Since I've started, let's talk about another question. Many people say that this book is the same as the previous one. I'm very puzzled. Which plot in this book is exactly the same as the previous one? If similar background worlds are the same, then in our China's ancient history, it has been repeated for 5,000 years. We are looking at the story, the plot, not the background. I won't explain this question later. Friends who really like this book won't care about this. Friends who don't like this book, I will explain it again. Up until now, I have stood shoulder to shoulder with my brothers, creating the glory of the evil monarch. Everyone knows how I do things. I go to the book review and comments section every day. Moreover, I will reply to some valuable comments. When I see a familiar ID, I will feel very cordial and will welcome it. Here, I would like to thank those friends who gave me comments on this book. As long as it is a book review, it must be a book review. It is these friends who helped me perfect the evil monarch step by step. So, thank you again. However, there are some people who read this book and even read it with great interest. They can even pick out the typos in the book and read it very carefully. Yet, they keep shouting, I really can't bear to read it anymore. Whoever reads it is an idiot. Every time I see this kind of attack, I always laugh so hard that I'm about to die. Really, you guys make me so happy. It turns out that people can be so stupid. There were also some aimless attacks, some even attacking without looking at the book. I can only thank you again, because you have once again provided me with a chance to be narcissistic. The tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. So, I am proud. Thank you, for providing me with spiritual satisfaction and a sense of achievement. And these are things that I originally couldn't enjoy. Chapter 136. The hitman June had a bit of a donkey's temper. If you flatter him, then you can say whatever you want. But if you insist on being tough, then the hitman June won't let you get away with it. You can be unreasonable, but I'll be even more unreasonable. Perhaps this was the biggest weakness in his character. She pointed at Yi Guhan's nose and lectured him. Then, she ignored Yi Guhan's angry face and turned to look at Dugu Xiaoyi. With a helpless expression, she said, I say, Miss Dugu, isn't your little white too easy to trick? No, I didn't provoke him at all, and he just rushed towards me. Last time, even if I'm handsome and lovable, does a Xian beast like you even know what a handsome man is? Chu Yang thought to himself. This young master wants to catch him and stew him in a pot, but he's so small and doesn't have much meat. Little White was comfortably lying in June Imosie's arms. His throat was emitting a soft hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo sound. This was the sound he would make when he was at his happiest. He opened his warm and satisfied eyes to look at June Imosie's body. Then, he closed his eyes again, and continued to revel in the feeling. He didn't know that his closest and kindest friend was planning to stew him in a pot. Dugu Xiaoyi was in a state of infinite bashfulness. She had just heard June Moxie call her little girl in a very intimate manner, and had even said, this is between me and this little girl. What is going on between me and him? The little girl suddenly became bashful again. He even talked about Little White with me. Her heart was beating very fast, but after a while, she finally realized that this guy actually wanted to stew her Little White. What did you just say? She glared angrily at June Imosia. Her small hands clenched into fists, and she looked fiercely at June Imosia. She suddenly felt that this guy was asking for a beating. Ah, eldest young lady, please don't hit me again. Your father and your 7 brothers have destroyed the entire June family. Not even a single roof tile can cover their heads. They've already beaten me to a crisp on the outside and tender on the inside. I don't look like a human anymore. June Imosia cupped his hands in obeisance, and leaned against the palanquin as if he didn't have a single bone in his body. His face was mournful, and it seemed as if he had been ravaged by the Dugu family's younger generation. He really was burnt to a crisp, and didn't look like a human anymore. But it was Dugu Xiaoyi's 7 brothers. Oh. I know it's not your fault. I'm sorry. I'll ask my father to help you repair your house, and I'll pay for any damages. Dugu Xiaoyi felt very embarrassed. After all, she was the reason why June Moxie had been harassed by her family. Poor little girl. She only knew that her family had caused trouble for June Moxie because of her. She had imagined that her father and her 7 brothers would have made things difficult for the June family and June Moxie. Even if it wasn't as exaggerated as June Moxie had made it out to be, it shouldn't be too far off. She didn't know that her 7 brothers were still bedridden by June Moxie. And her troublemaker father had also been extorted by June Moxie, even though he hadn't paid the bill yet. It's nothing. Ah, you can't be blamed for this. Your father probably didn't understand the situation. June Moxie magnanimously waved his hand. I'm a junior, so I'll just bear with it for a while. After all, our families have been friends for generations. How many years of deep affection do we have? Do we really have to cross swords and spears? Dugu Xiaoyi nodded vigorously. Her pretty eyes were shining. She said with a satisfied face, actually, you don't have to care too much about my feelings. There are some things you don't have to mistreat yourself too much. She stuttered these 2 sentences. When she finished, her face had already turned as red as a burning cloud, almost to her neck. Poor little girl. She had completely misunderstood the direction. She instinctively thought that June Moxie was enduring the abuse of his father and brothers for her. When she thought of this, the little girl suddenly felt sweet as if she had eaten honey. She didn't know how she thought about it, but she automatically thought of this aspect. June Moxie was very kind and righteous. He said, it's what I should do, what I should do. Dugu Xiaoyi became even more bashful. She unconsciously drew circles on the ground with the tip of her toes. She tilted her head, and her face was blushing. Her big eyes flickered as she secretly looked at June Moxie. Her heart was filled with infinite satisfaction. It was as if she was saying, I'm very happy that you can do this. These 2 people were like a couple. Yi Gahan couldn't stand it anymore. He let out a long sigh. He couldn't imagine that there was someone in this world who could be so shameless. June Moxie, you're too shameless, aren't you? Yi Gahan pointed at June Moxie. He really wanted to beat this guy to death. The 7 brothers of the Dugu family suffered a great loss in your hands. How can you say such things now? Ah! How is that possible? Dugu Xiaoyi cried out in shock. She looked at June Moxie in disbelief. There's no such thing. June Moxie denied flatly. He was deliberately stirring up trouble and sowing discord. Yi Gahan, you're a dignified Tian Shen expert. How could you fabricate such a rumor to deceive Miss Dugu? Humph, it's impossible. How fierce are those 7 people? How can I deal with them? How can I deal with them? What are you trying to do by distorting the truth? He couldn't admit it at this critical moment. He couldn't admit it even if he was beaten to death. If Dugu Xiaoyi were to flip out at him, it was better to leave. Dugu Xiaoyi looked at Yi Gahan in confusion. Miss Dugu, you'll know when you go home. Yi Gahan was unmoved. He looked at June Moxie coldly. Miss Dugu, it's late at night. We'd better hurry on our way. I have to go back to protect the princess. Dugu Xiaoyi was hesitant. It wasn't easy to see June Moxie, and the atmosphere was so good. She was reluctant to leave. However, Yi Gahan's sudden interruption made the little girl more worried about the situation at home. She knew Yi Gahan's character very well. Yi Gahan wasn't the kind of person who would speak without thinking. However, June Moxie's ability didn't seem to be enough to deal with her brothers. Little White, come to Big Sister. Big Sister will take you home. Dugu Xiaoyi clapped her hands and walked over to June Moxie. Smelling the faint scent on June Moxie's body, she couldn't help but blush. June Moxie hurriedly picked up the leopard and handed it to Dugus Xiaoyi. The little guy didn't resist this time. He just looked at June Moxie with a pitiful expression. At this moment, a question popped up in June Moxie's mind. Why is this leopard so attached to me? I've never seen him before. Logically speaking, this was something that did not make sense at all. There's no such thing as unreasonable in this world. There must be something that I haven't thought of. Something that only I have and others don't. Could it be because of the exquisite Hongjun Pagoda and the art of unlocking heaven's fortune? This thought flashed through June Imosie's mind like lightning. This is the only explanation. June. Imosie, I'll go and find you tomorrow, okay? Dugus Xiaoyi lowered her head and held the leopard in her arms. She found an excuse for herself. Little White really likes you. If he can't see you, he will be very unhappy. I don't want him to be unhappy. Dugus Xiaoyi's pink neck drooped down as she finished speaking. She didn't know why she had said these words. Moreover, the reason she had given him was truly too lousy. All right. June Imosie thought for a moment, and then readily agreed. Tomorrow, I'll help you coax him and make him behave. Tomorrow, we'll play with him together. Dugus Xiaoyi was overjoyed. It's a deal. It's a deal. June Moxie looked at the little guy with bad intentions. He laughed in his heart. Little thing, I'm going to use you as an experiment tomorrow. Ugh. The little guy in Dugus Xiaoyi's arms suddenly felt a chill all over its body. Its soft white fur stood up. It looked around vigilantly, but there were no enemies. Then, it lowered its head in confusion. If it could speak, it would definitely ask, what's going on? Why is my hair standing on end? Is it because I'm wearing too little? I only have this much fur. Dugus Xiaoyi looked back at every step as she walked away. June Imosie wasn't in the mood to stay outside any longer. So, he quickly returned to his residence. Third uncle. When June Imosie returned, the first thing he did was to run into June Wuyi's courtyard. But as soon as he entered the door, he was hit by the stench. He covered his nose and came out. What's that smell? June Wuyi walked out slowly. He wouldn't sit in a wheelchair when there were no outsiders. He was tired of it after sitting in a wheelchair for 10 years. Third Master June's eyes were deep. I want those children back. Children? Which children? June Moxie stuttered. We found a total of 45 boys and girls who were released by us. I've tidied up the empty warehouse and placed them there temporarily. As for the children with deformities, I have 39 of them with me. I'm trying to use mystic chi to unblock their tendons and meridians to see if there's any hope of helping them recover. I hope they can live like ordinary people. June Moxie was shocked. June Wuyi's eyes were deep. Imosie, you are very purposeful. Moreover, you are too utilitarian. However, you must remember that the cultivation of our family's power is our top priority. It's understandable for us to be strict or even cruel. But as long as they are from the June family, we have an obligation to be responsible for them. This includes food, clothing, housing, and the sick. In addition, we can't be kind, but we can't abandon them. June Wuyi put his hands behind his back. His eyes were filled with pain. He looked at the house behind him. Just like these children, we can't ignore them. June Wuyi said this resolutely. There was no room for doubt. He thought of his 10 years of disability and looked at these children. He couldn't help but sympathize with them. Even if they can't do anything, as long as we can afford to support them, it doesn't matter. Chapter 137. To be honest, June Dashao had always been an assassin. Calmness, cold-bloodedness, and even cold-bloodedness were common to him. At most, he would only take care of those who were genuinely good to him. In his previous life, the only ones who could be included in this list were his master and a few close brothers. As for this life, it was limited to Grandpa Jun and Jun Wui. Even his nominal sister-in-law, Guan Qinghan, was not included in the hitman's list of close friends. Jun Dashao may be compassionate towards those who were in distress, but when it came to taking care of them for the rest of their lives, he would politely decline. Of course, there is a limit to kindness. If one day, we are unable to take care of ourselves, then I may be the first to abandon this group of people. But when we have the ability, we must do our best. There is no other reason. People don't need a reason to save people. Jun Wuyi's words weren't disguised in the slightest. However, Jun Imo-sia could feel his determination. A person may need a reason to harm others, but a person does not need a reason to save others. If you have the ability to do good deeds, but don't do it, then you are naturally cold-blooded. But if you don't have the ability to do good deeds, then you will only be consigned to eternal damnation. Jun Moxie certainly understood this truth, and he understood it even more than Jun Wui. By the way, why are you in such a hurry to look for me? Jun Wui turned his head and asked. It's like this, I need a group of Xian beasts, from low level to high level. It would be best if there are level 8 Xian beasts. Jun Moxie smiled. Level 8? Have you woken up from your dream? Where do you expect me to find one for you? Jun Wui was both angry and amused as he looked at his nephew. Don't even mention level 8, even lower level Xian beasts may not be able to exchange for them. Level 4 or 5 Xian beasts may be in good condition, but level 5 or 6 Xian beasts may be lucky enough to be able to exchange for them, but their bodies will certainly be disabled. As for level 7 and above, don't even dream about it. Only low-level Xian beasts? That's not a problem. Those should be enough. Right, if there's a 5th or 6th grade dark beast, even if it's crippled, it doesn't matter as long as it's alive. Send it to me as well. Jun Moxie pondered for a moment before speaking readily. I want it tomorrow morning. Understood, I will arrange it immediately. Jun Wui did not hesitate and did not even ask Jun Moxie what these Xian beasts were for. After all, this was a huge expenditure. A 5th or 6th level Xian beast, even if it was a crippled one, would still cost a considerable sum. Thank you, third uncle, said Jun Moxie seriously. Well, you can go back first. I still have some work to do. The sooner we can save them, the more hope we have. At least, we can reduce their pain. Jun Wui's face showed a trace of fatigue. I will accompany third uncle to take a look. Jun Moxie stepped inside. The 39 children in the room had obviously been washed more than once. Their beds and bedding were snow-white. However, this couldn't conceal the pungent stench. It was obvious that some of the dirt had seeped into their skin, and some had even seeped into their bones. This wasn't something that could be washed off in a short period of time. These children were all skin and bones, and they were as thin as a match. These 39 children had one thing in common: their hands and feet were deformed, and their tongues were cut off. In fact, more than 20 of them had been pierced in their ears, and they were truly deaf and mute. Jun Moxie sighed. His heart was filled with a monstrous rage towards the mastermind behind the Huanghua Hall. Such conduct cannot be tolerated by the heavens. If I discover anything, I will repay them tenfold or 100-fold. These children had already eaten their meals, and their complexions looked much better. At least, they looked a little more rosy and full of vitality. The children knew that these two were their saviors when they saw them come in. Although they couldn't speak, their eyes were filled with gratitude. Children were like this, they would naturally feel grateful if you treated them well. Jun Moxie revealed a gentle smile for the first time in his 2 lives. He comforted these pitiful children, and began to examine the children in detail from the one closest to him. His examination speed was obviously much faster than Jun Wui's. After a long time, Jun Moxie stood up with a heavy expression on his face. He winked at Jun Wui, and the 2 of them walked out together. A few of them can't be saved. Jun Moxie gritted his teeth. 3 of them have their bones rusted. Their lower body and waist bones have rotted. It's only a matter of time before they die. Even if we have elixirs, we can't do anything about it. Although they can still breathe now, they definitely won't be able to hold on for more than half a month. And it's going to be an extremely painful and torturous half a month. Jun Wui clenched his fists tightly. There are also quite a number of people whose bones and meridians in their hands and feet are completely necrotic. They can never recover. They can only live with deformities for the rest of their lives. Jun Moxie lowered his voice. Among these people, there are another 12 people. If we amputate their lower limbs from the waist down, they might still be able to live. But, for the rest of their lives, they won't have the ability of a man or a woman. Jun Wui let out a long sigh. His expression was cold and hard. As for the rest, although they are also deformities, it's not very serious because they haven't been deformities for a long time, or because of some other reasons. After a period of good nursing, break and destroy the joints of their hands and feet once, and then carefully treat them to regrow. Then, supplement with medicine to speed up the growth process. Before the regrowth is fixed, break it again, and then use mystical energy to wash their meridians. If we do this twice, maybe they can recover to the same state as a normal person. To do this kind of nursing, the cost of any one of them is no less than 10,000 taels of silver. Moreover, there's no guarantee of the final outcome of the treatment. Actually, these concerns are secondary. The most difficult hurdle is the 2 broken bones. It's not just a simple fracture. Under the condition that the meridians are not damaged, every part of the bones has to be broken, scattered, and regrowth. During this process, the patient has to suffer great pain. Jun Moxie's gaze was deep. It's not something an ordinary person can endure. There's a possibility of dying from the pain. And, even if they really recover, they can only have 60% of a normal person's physical strength for the rest of their lives. This is already the most optimistic estimate. Jun Wui sucked in a mouthful of cold air. Jun Wui had complete faith in his nephew's medical skills. So, he didn't doubt his judgment. He didn't doubt his nephew's judgment. Even if he was lucky enough to save a few of these people, it didn't mean that they would be able to live like ordinary people. In fact, living was already a kind of suffering for them. If third uncle really wants to save them, I'll say this first. I said that treating each person will cost 10,000 taels of silver. But, that's only the most conservative estimate. Moreover, I didn't include the cost of their later recuperation. That's because the cost of the treatment won't be low. But, it can't be compared to the cost of nursing their bodies. That's because their bodily functions have already fallen to the lowest point. Therefore, the medicine needed to nurse them will be extremely expensive and indispensable. And, the cost of the above treatment will be at least 50,000 taels of silver by the time they are able to recover to the state of a normal person. And, I believe that this number will be an astronomical figure for any ordinary family. And, the combination of these people will reach an even more astonishing level. Third uncle, I don't know if you've seriously considered all of this. I know that our Jun family's wealth isn't small. But, third uncle, you have to be clear about this matter. Moreover, you have to consider this matter from the Jun family's perspective. Once this matter starts, and we destroy each and every one of these nests of evil, there will be more and more of these pitiful people. Should we save them or not? If we really want to save them all, then I believe that the insignificant Jun family, even the entire Tianxiang kingdom doesn't have the financial resources to bear this astronomical figure. If third uncle insists on taking responsibility, then there will only be one outcome. And, there will only be one outcome. And, that is, the Jun family will be destroyed along with these people. I don't object to third uncle doing good deeds out of kindness, but the problem with this matter has to end here. This cannot be allowed to happen again. Following Jun Moxie's calm, callous, and almost cold-blooded analysis, Jun Wui's complexion gradually became heavy. In fact, he even became somewhat dispirited. Good things are hard to do. Jun Moxie sighed deeply. If these children were in his previous world, perhaps a large family like the Jun family could call upon the society to set up a charity fund. Or, perhaps, an orphanage or something like that would be able to provide for them. But, in this world, under this feudal monarchical system, was this even possible? The answer was undoubtedly no. Let's not talk about whether or not the other large families would respond to this embarrassing matter of putting in money and effort without getting anything in return. Just the fact that the June family would be able to attract the support of the people was enough to make the imperial family restless. Under such a feudal system, doing too many evil deeds would certainly lead to one's death. But, doing too much good deeds would also bring about a disaster. Let's do as you say. This cannot be allowed to happen again. Tomorrow, I will arrange for people to send those boys and girls in the warehouse to their fiefdoms. As for these people, Junwui gritted his teeth and said, since we've already done it, there's no reason to give up halfway. I can't let them go to the June family without any hope. This is the only time. Alright, let's do as third uncle says. But, third uncle should make a decision as soon as possible to give those 15 people who have no hope at all. Now that they're alive, every moment they live is another moment of great pain. Being alive is already a great torture. Unfortunately, they don't have the strength to end their own lives. Killing them may seem cruel, but it's already a great relief for them. And, third uncle, please remember that this is the only time. Junwui nodded sadly. In addition, after the treatment, I want 2 people to stay behind. Among so many people, only 2 of them will have some unorthodox abilities. When that time comes, third uncle, don't be soft-hearted. June Moxie said, third uncle, I would like to ask if there are any problems with the financial income of our June family? I shouldn't be asking too much, but... Chapter 138. There hasn't been any war in recent years, so the June family's income has decreased a lot. At present, the fief has an annual income of nearly 2 million taels of silver. As for the rest, that's all. Junwui wasn't disobedient, he understood the meaning behind June Moxie's question, and although he felt quite helpless, but he had to say it. Only this? That's too little. June Moxie bluntly said, only a trifling 2 million taels of silver. I'm afraid it's not even enough to support an ordinary big family. Such a meager income is simply not enough to support a big family like the June family. An annual income of 2 million taels of silver may seem like a lot. For an ordinary family, it's not an exaggeration to say that it's an astronomical figure, but compared to a big family like the June family, it's really too little. Although there aren't many direct descendants of the June family, but in this big courtyard, there are more than 1,000 of them. The expenses of food, clothing, and the salaries of these people is definitely a very shocking figure. Leave the financial aspect to me for the time being. I may have a way to help the family improve. June Moxie paced a couple of steps, his heart secretly calculating for a moment, thinking that his wine was going to be auctioned soon. When the time comes, it shouldn't be a problem to supplement the family's living expenses. There really is no other way. I'll just have to be black-hearted for once. A cup of 10,000 taels of gold is too expensive, then I'll just have to make it more expensive. In any case, it's up to you whether you want to buy it or not. It's better for you to die than for me. Everyone understands this truth. After thinking for a moment, June Dashao said, as for the remaining 24 people, third uncle can carefully observe them during this time of recovery, and see what they are interested in. Maybe it'll be useful in the future. Although we've already decided to support them, but we can't just support them for a lifetime. If they have the ability to do something in the future, but don't do it, then what's the point of supporting them? People always have their own value. It has no value at all. It's just a breathing corpse. It's better to abandon it. Junwui nodded solemnly. What June Moxie said today gave Junwui a familiar feeling once again. That was specious, but actually wrong. There was a reason, but it still went against the natural law and human ethics. But if it was wrong, it was undeniable. Every word was biased, but it's too unconventional. Junwui shook his head helplessly. His nephew's way of doing things and his thoughts were completely different from the orthodox etiquette and morality, but he was more practical. Was this a good thing or a bad thing? However, the hitman June didn't know that the third uncle was also sighing. This third uncle was too much of a gentleman. In fact, he wasn't even qualified to be the head of the June family. The patriarch of a large family did not have to be completely heartless and cold, but there were things that he could do and things that he could not do. Personal sympathy and compassion couldn't be used as a basis for doing things. All behavior should be based on the family's interests. However, Jun Wui hadn't realized this yet. At best, he was still stuck at the level of an iron-blooded warrior. Jun Moxie went back to his room, but the third uncle Jun Wui didn't feel sleepy at all. He simply moved his wheelchair out, and placed a small tea table in front of him. He took out a jar of wine, and poured himself a cup of wine. The breeze was blowing, and the night was as cool as water. It was as if he had returned to the past 10 years. Jun Wui was upset at first. He thought of these pitiful children, and then thought of Jun Moxie's words. He felt even more annoyed. After a long time, his mood finally calmed down. As the saying goes, wine enters the bowels of one's bowels, and makes one feel even more depressed. He couldn't help but feel sad again. Yao Er, if you were by my side, what would you do? Would you help me make a choice? Do you know how much I miss you? Jun Wui muttered in a low voice. He raised his cup of wine, and drank it in one gulp. He didn't say a word. The cool moonlight hung high in the sky, and its faint radiance sprinkled on his body. The surroundings became quiet. The chirping of insects, the weeping of the wind. Jun Moxie returned to his courtyard. 2 black-clothed men had been waiting for him for a long time. Young master, this is a messenger pigeon from the Ni Chong Pavilion. One of the black-clothed men bowed and said. Young master, this is a messenger pigeon from the Ni Chong Pavilion. The black-clothed man smiled and said, it wasn't hurt, right? Jun Moxie took the pigeon and looked at it. Young master has already instructed us to not harm it. If we let go now, this carrier pigeon will still be able to fly far away. I believe it won't take too much time to reach the place it wants to go. The black-clothed man smiled and said confidently. Jun Moxie nodded and gently untied a small bamboo tube from the pigeon's leg. He then took out a roll of crumpled paper. Within a month, the Jun family's Xia must be killed. The 2 of us cannot coexist. There was only a short sentence written on the paper. The handwriting was very sloppy, and it was obvious that the person who wrote this was very excited. It was signed with a small U character. Haha, this woman is too narrow-minded. Is there a need to be like this? With such a temperament, it will be difficult for her to achieve great things. Jun Moxie smiled and shook his head in disdain. The 2 black-clothed men's faces twitched at the same time. For any woman, wouldn't it be enough to want to kill someone after encountering such a situation? Especially for a proud and beautiful woman who has Xian Qi. She doesn't even seem to be a pure woman. If we release this pigeon, can we track it? Jun Moxie waved the paper in his hand. We can't track it. The black-clothed man looked embarrassed. This kind of pigeon is very good at flying long distances and is extremely tenacious. We can only capture or kill it when it first takes off. At other times, our strength is limited and we can't do anything about it. Oh, then it's fine. Jun Xia carefully returned the paper to its original state and stuffed it back into the bamboo tube. Then, he carefully examined the paper to make sure that it was folded and tied in the same manner as Lady Yu. Then, he used the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune to erase any trace of his aura. Then, he said, all right, let it fly. The black-clothed man took the pigeon and turned to leave. Jun Moxie smiled as the night wind gently brushed his cheeks. Put down the rat trap and wait for the big mouse. Spread the net, who can escape? Ha ha. This night was destined to be an unusual one for the Tianxiang city. In the silent night, there would be people flying up from time to time with different profound chi radiances of gold, silver, white, and yellow, flashing and disappearing, as lively as fireworks. Countless pairs of eyes were vigilantly watching the dark imperial city. Everyone's ears were listening for even the slightest movement in the wind. Occasionally, 2 groups of people would bump into each other. A single word of disagreement would lead to a bloody battle to the death. Then, they would retreat, leaving behind bloodstains, broken limbs, and corpses. The secret forces of the Li family, the Meng family, the Song family, and the Murong family had all mobilized a considerable part of their forces to monitor something at all times. Even if it was a hooligan in the streets, if he accidentally said something sensitive, he would instantly be invited to a tea party. The peak level 9 Xian Dan had undoubtedly stirred the hearts of the world's Xian experts. Only the Dugu and Jun families remained motionless. Another strange thing was that the Xian Dan had been stolen from the Tang family. But the Tang family had been the most patient of all the families. Not only had they not sent people to investigate, but the Tang family's members had also been recalled. Moreover, they had issued strict orders that no one was allowed to go out at will. In the darkness of the night, 8 black shadows flew over. They faced the tall city walls as if they were walking on flat ground. They entered the city without a sound. Then, they stealthily entered the Li family's residence. In the north of the Tianxiang city, the sound of wheels rolling could be heard. A group of people was quietly advancing towards the Tianxiang city at full speed. Among this group of people, there were actually quite a few luxurious carriages, and the horses pulling the carriages were incomparably handsome. They were much taller than ordinary horses, and there were actually 2 sharp horns on their foreheads. Their 4 legs were faintly covered in scales. Obviously, these weren't ordinary horses. Instead, they were special Xian beasts. Every single carriage in this group of carriages was pulled by 4 of these dark beasts, and their speed was extremely swift. Even the steeds that galloped on the battlefield would probably be unable to keep up with them. But, they were only making light noises. In the first carriage. 6th grandfather, we don't know if the Xian Dan's matter is true or not. But, we've come from thousands of miles away. Isn't this making a big fuss over a minor issue? Besides, the Tianxiang city has 6th uncle and Uncle Mu. Uncle Mu. Moreover, the 9th elder is keeping watch. How could such a formidable force escape their grasp? The person who spoke didn't sound very old, and his voice carried the sharpness of a teenager. It was obvious that he was filled with impatience. Feng Wu, this matter is related to a peak level 9 Xian Dan. So, we have to be careful. You're still inexperienced. So, you don't know about this. A few days ago, the 9th elder sent a message saying that a peak Xian expert had appeared. Then, the news of a level 9 Xian Dan came out. This is enough to prove the authenticity of this matter. But, I'm worried that we won't be able to obtain the Xian Dan even if we all arrive. After all, it's a peak Xian expert. So, there's no guarantee that we'll be able to obtain the Xian Dan. An old voice sounded. Who in the world dares to oppose our Silver Blizzard City? What's more, the 3rd elder will be accompanying us this time, along with you, 6th grandpa. Even if it's a peak spirit Xian expert, there's still the 9th elder who has already made arrangements there. Moreover, there's also the geographical advantage. I believe that we'll be able to obtain the Xian core. 6th grandpa is worrying too much. The young man's voice was full of lofty arrogance. It seemed as if being born in the Silver Blizzard City was already an extraordinary thing. Boy, don't blame me for calling you a frog at the bottom of a well. Do you know how many experts there are in this world? Our Silver Blizzard City may be strong enough to look down on the world, but we can't be careless. The old man sighed. There was a hint of pride in his voice as he continued, but, there are very few things in this world that are worthy of the 3rd elder and the 9th elder's attention. I remember that the last time was 10 years ago. Time really makes one grow old, this saying is true. Chapter 139. When the youngster next to her heard the words little princess, his eyes lit up. The moonlight shone on his face, revealing a bit of longing and fascination. This youngster had been pursuing this outstanding beauty and noble temperament for a long time. In the middle carriage, there was a girl dressed in snow-white clothes. She was about 16 or 17 years old. Her features were picturesque, and her beauty was indescribable. However, there was a hint of cleverness in her eyes. It was obvious that she was not a law-abiding character, and was probably extremely mischievous. At this time, she was shaking the arm of an old man with snow-white hair and beard in the carriage. "Third Grandpa, you're talking about the most important part. Why don't you continue? Don't keep me in suspense." The old man was still pretending to be dead with his eyes closed. His old face was wrinkled like an old eggplant, and he was crying in his heart. "I've finally experienced the fierceness of this little princess." No wonder those old fellows heaved a long sigh of relief when they found out that I was accompanying the little princess down the mountain. It was as if a heavy burden had been lifted off their shoulders. Then, they looked at me with sympathy, pity, and even schadenfreude in their eyes. "I say, little princess, ever since you left the Silver City, I've been telling you stories all the way until now. During the day, I've been telling you stories until the stars filled the sky. At night, I've been telling you stories until Dongfang shines. I've also been telling you stories when we're eating. Even when the dragon-scaled horses are resting. Little princess, Third Grandpa has just come out of seclusion. It's been decades since I roamed the world. How can I remember so many stories? Can you let these old bones of mine go?" The old man wanted to cry but had no tears. If he had known that this little princess had such a temper, he would have quit this errand no matter what. I really despise myself. When I first received the news, I was excited to go out for a stroll. Now, it seems that this is not a stroll. This is clearly tormenting my old bones until they fall apart. Who asked you to suddenly shut up at the critical moment? You're keeping me in suspense. The little princess pouted her lips in dissatisfaction. Then, she started to sway and act like a spoiled child. "Third Gong Gong, hurry up and continue. That June family, that June Wui, what happened to them after that? Also, eldest sister, their love story is so beautiful and touching," the third elder groaned in his stomach. This matter was a taboo in the Silver City, and no one dared to talk about it lightly. He had talked until his throat was parched, and he had been cornered by this little she-devil. So, he had inadvertently said a few words. Only a few words. Who would have thought that this little she-devil would stick to this matter after that? She had been chattering non-stop, and had kept asking about it until now. The old man wanted to cry a little. From last night until tonight, it had already been 15 to 16 hours, sixth brother. Come over here and tell the little princess a story. This old man will swap places with you. I will owe you a favor as your big brother. The third elder had no choice but to propose a swap. Alright, remember that you owe me a big favor. That night, this old man suddenly found a ghost. Its tongue was long, and blood was dripping from it. I will tell the little princess about it. The sixth elder was not to be trifled with. Ah! No! No, no, no! Sixth Gong Gong, don't come over. I only want Third Gong Gong to tell me. Before he could finish, the little princess had already cried out in alarm, and hurriedly refused. Third brother, you see, it's not that I don't want to give you face. It's just that the little princess won't let me go over. Ha ha ha. Third brother, take your time to tell me. Don't forget that you owe me a big favor. And, making the little princess happy will be a great merit for you. This little brother will go to sleep first. The sixth elder laughed heartily, and then went silent. Despicable. Shameless. No sense of brotherhood. How dare you call yourself my brother? The third elder cursed angrily. Third Gong Gong, could it be that you hate Shui? The little princess's eyes glistened with tears, and she seemed to be on the verge of crying. Of course not, of course not. The third elder flatly denied. I feel sorry for Shui, hee hee. Then quickly tell me a story. Tell me the story of my sister and Jun Wui. If you don't tell me, then it means that you hate Shui. The little princess's anger immediately turned into joy, and she beamed with joy. The third elder almost fainted from holding his breath. What a sin! What kind of debt did I owe in my entire life? The wheels rolled on, and the little princess was in high spirits. Her fighting spirit was high, and she couldn't stop chattering along the way. She was extremely curious. The third elder, even though he was a master like Shenxian, couldn't stand it anymore. The wrinkles on his old face became deeper, and his spirit became more and more dispirited. The group was getting closer and closer to Tianxiang City. In another direction, there was also a group of people on horseback heading towards Tianxiang City. Imperial Tutor, I'm afraid that the Xiandan incident is still unknown. You're risking your life like this, it's not worth it. The one who spoke was a man dressed in black riding on a horse. His figure was thin, and his face was rigid. Just by looking at his face, one could tell that he was filled with the bitterness of war. This trip seems to be fraught with danger, but Yu Tang and Tianxiang have been living in harmony all these years. There shouldn't be too much of a problem. From an official point of view, we're going to enjoy the treatment of a state guest. Besides, the three princes of Tianxiang are currently in a heated argument. We should add fuel to the fire, and fish in troubled waters in order to benefit from it. Moreover, I believe that no one will be able to stop me from leaving Tianxiang even if there are some people who are equally matched with me in terms of martial arts. An old man dressed in a white robe had his hands in his sleeves. His face was tall and thin, and his spirit was hale and hearty. His demeanor was relaxed. On the other hand, you're the one who's taking the greatest risk in escorting me to Tianxiang City. You've been at war with the Jun family for many years, and we're mortal enemies. Moreover, almost all of the Jun family's descendants have died fighting with you. I'm afraid that your situation is far more dangerous than mine. How is it dangerous? If the Jun family takes advantage of this opportunity to gather their forces against me, then they're not fit to be my enemy. The middle-aged man's callous face was calm and carefree as he smiled. Moreover, even I won in a daze over what happened back then. But, one thing is certain, those people from the Jun family didn't die by my hands. In all fairness, I'm no match for any one of the three brothers of the Jun family. A look of humiliation suddenly appeared on his face as he said this. He then angrily said, the three brothers of Jun Wuhui can be said to be the enemies that I admire the most in my life. I admit that I'm not as good as them. Even if I were to die by Jun Wuhui's hands, I wouldn't have a single complaint. It's still better than this. Those victories were obtained in such an inexplicable manner. Such victories are a great humiliation for me. This time, I'm going to Tianxiang to escort the Imperial Preceptor. Secondly, and most importantly, I want to find out how Jun Wuhui died. If his death was caused by someone, then I'll avenge him even if I'm his enemy. The black-clothed middle-aged man's knife-like face revealed anger and grief. Such a heroic man shouldn't have died because of a conspiracy. That's up to you. The Imperial Preceptor smiled meaningfully. I know that you've been suspecting me all these years, and that I've been acting in secret, right? Shouldn't I be suspicious? If there's anyone who can plot against the Jun Wuhui brothers, I believe that the Imperial Preceptor can't be a second person. The black-clothed middle-aged man suddenly turned his head, and his eagle-like eyes looked straight at the Imperial Preceptor's face. You're a frog at the bottom of a well. There are many capable people in this world. Everything will be proven by the facts. The Imperial Tutor's expression was tranquil as he met his gaze. To tell you the truth, Jun Wuhui's death, although I did intend to take action at that time, and even went there myself, it was not me who did it. Humph. The black-clothed middle-aged man's face was filled with humiliation as he shouted, this is a war between soldiers, why are you meddling in other people's business? He paused for a moment, and then suddenly roared, who asked you to meddle in other people's business? The Imperial Preceptor was silent for a long time, and then said, Zhao Jianhun, some things are not just a matter of soldiers. For the country, for the family, for people, for themselves, this is child's play. After saying this, he looked at the dark night ahead, and didn't say another word. Zhao Jianhun, this black-clothed middle-aged man, turned out to be the Yutang Empire's #1 general, and the sworn enemy of the three brothers, Jun Wuhui, Jun Wumeng, and Jun Wuyi. Zhao Jianhun smiled arrogantly, and said in a low voice, Jun Wu Hui and Jun Wu Meng are dead, but the third brother, Jun Wu Yi, is still alive, and sooner or later, I will see the light of day again. I will never accept such a humiliating victory. All these years, these 4 consecutive inexplicable victories have really driven me crazy. Do you know? Zhao Jianhun looked up to the sky and sighed. In another direction. There was also another country's border, and there was also a large group of people rushing over. And this direction belonged to the Shenxia Empire. In the distant prairie, a middle-aged man dressed in a black robe was proudly standing in the middle of the prairie, and a small sparrowhawk was flying from his hand. His hands were gently folded behind his back, and his calm face was smiling. Level 9 Peak Xian Dan. It's really a good thing, even if it's not for the Xian Dan, to be able to exchange blows with the world's heroes is also a great thing in life. This middle-aged man was tall and straight, with slender legs, and a face that seemed ordinary, but exuded a captivating charm. His long hair wasn't restrained at all, and was naturally hanging down loosely, making his whole person look full of demonic charm. He was standing there quietly, but it seemed as if he was accepting the worship of tens of thousands of creatures in the prairie. It was as if a demon king had suddenly emerged from the thick black fog, and was proudly overlooking the world. If you are a flood dragon, you will overturn the rivers and seas. If you are an eagle, you will fight in the sky. Tianxiang City, I, the solitary eagle, am coming. This man was known as the eagle god of the prairie, and he looked up to the sky and roared, and with this long roar, the sky above the prairie suddenly became turbulent. At the same time, there were also countless sporadic people, some in groups of 3, some in groups of 5, but the most were only a dozen people, and there were even countless people who came alone, and there was only one goal, Tianxiang City. Many people had gathered in Tianxiang City. At the same time, in the distant and mysterious Tianfa forest, there were all kinds of flying Xian beasts flying around at lightning speed, and suddenly, the quiet Tianfa forest began to fluctuate, and a tyrannical spirit continued to surge over the entire forest, and didn't stop for a long time. It seemed that not only the human world, but even the Tianfa forest, which was far away from the human world, was also experiencing some unusual changes due to some unknown reasons. After a long time, a roar shook the sky. Level 9 Peak Xian Dan, how could it fall into the hands of a Xian warrior? That is the greatest shame for us. An overwhelming pressure suddenly surged between the heavens and the earth, and the hundreds of millions of creatures in the Tianfa forest couldn't help but tremble. Chapter 140. The sky had just begun to brighten, and Jun Dashao had already completed today's physical training. His robust upper body was covered in sweat. Dashao casually wiped the sweat off his body, put on a long gown, and walked towards the warehouse. Jun Mo Xia wasn't willing to send the 40 or so boys and girls that his third uncle had rescued to his fief. Jun Mo Xia wasn't like the third master Jun's gentlemanly way of doing things. Giving a favor without expecting anything in return wasn't the hitman Jun's character. I've put in the effort, paid the price, and also bear the risk. In return, you must show me the corresponding value. Even if the Jun family has food to eat and absolutely no one will starve to death, but this food must be exchanged with your own strength and wisdom. Reaping without sowing must not be fantasized about. Don't think that we'll help you to the end just because we were kind enough to save you and feed you for the rest of your life. We have no obligation to feed you. Even if a meat pie really falls from the sky, one's head must be hard enough, and one's hands must be flexible enough to catch it, and not get smashed to death. Therefore, Jun Moxie wanted to see if there was anyone worthy of training, and his requirements weren't high, 1 or 2 would be enough. After all, the valuable boys and girls should have already been picked by the owner of the Hall of Huanghua. After half an hour, Jun Moxie came out with a disappointed look on his face. Unsurprisingly, the reason why the Hall of Huanghua had given up on training these boys and girls was not without reason. Whether it was their brains or their bones, they were obviously not made for practicing martial arts. Of course, they were also not made for practicing Xian Qi. Therefore, Jun Moxie could only choose to give up. If a group of people with no talent were to be forced to practice and then fight, then not only would it be a waste of time and effort, but it would also be a waste of money and resources. Moreover, it would only force them to die earlier, which would go against the original intention of saving them. These people should be like ordinary people, working at sunrise, and resting at sunset, following the will of the heavens. A large group of people had gathered at the entrance of the Jun residence. Third Master Jun Wui may have been disabled for many years, but he was still a celebrity in Tianxiang City. Moreover, he was also a powerful and influential figure. So, now that Third Master Jun had spread the news that he wanted to purchase a batch of Shen beasts, wouldn't anyone who had the money flock to him? Therefore, when the gatekeeper of the Jun family opened the gate, he was startled to see the surging crowd outside. In fact, this kind of thing wasn't uncommon 7 or 8 years ago. At that time, Third Master Jun Wui had been crippled. Old Master Jun had spared no effort to look for famous doctors and experts to treat Jun Wui. He had also bought a lot of rare treasures and rare playthings. He had even bought a lot of books and toys in the hope that Jun Wui would have something to rely on. Although Third Master Jun had long been disheartened, he couldn't bear to disappoint his father's kind intentions. So, he had reluctantly bribed him. However, Grandpa Jun and his son were sensible people. So, after a few times, they understood each other's intentions. However, this time, Third Master Jun had taken the initiative to spread the word that he wanted to purchase Shen beasts. Therefore, a large number of merchants in Tianxiang City had flocked to him. Jun Wui sat upright in his wheelchair as he slowly walked out. He understood Jun Moxi's intentions. If Jun Moxi only wanted Shen beasts, then he wouldn't have needed his third uncle's help. He could have done it himself. Since this matter was being handled through him, then it could only mean one thing: Jun Moxi didn't want this matter to be known by others. At least, he didn't want others to know that it was Jun Dashao who wanted Shen beasts. His nephew's actions were always unexpected. However, he had to admit that Jun Dashao didn't say much, but his words always hit the nail on the head. Moreover, the more he thought about it, the more he felt that his words were reasonable. He was truly unfathomable. Jun Wui was naturally very concerned about this matter. Therefore, he personally came out to select the Shen beasts. From the 1st to the 5th level, he deliberately selected 2 of the best quality Shen beasts for each level. As for the rest, he sent them back. It wasn't that he didn't want the 6th level Shen beasts, but that there wasn't a single 6th level Shen beast in the entire Tianxiang City. Even if they were defective, there was no market for them. Jun Wui waved his hand, and ordered people to carry the cages containing the Shen beasts into his courtyard. By the time Jun Moxi arrived, the 10 Shen beasts had already been cleaned by the Jun family servants. Each of them looked much more spirited. At least, they didn't look dirty or sloppy. There were 2 level 1 white Shen rabbits, 2 level 2 winged raccoons, level 3 winged wolves, level 4 barbarian bulls, and level 5 iron snakes. Jun Moxi waved his hand, and ordered the servants to leave first. Then, he stopped in front of the cage of the level 1 white Shen rabbits. The 2 rabbits didn't raise their heads or open their eyes, and simply ignored him. Rubbing his nose, Jun Moxi stood in front of the cage of the winged raccoons, but still didn't respond. Level 3, still no response. Jun Moxi began to lose confidence. Could it be that his judgment was wrong? Could it be that Little White and I simply hit it off? However, giving up halfway wasn't Jun Moxi's character. He didn't have much hope, and was just about to walk towards the 4th cage when suddenly a hissing sound was heard. The 2 iron snakes at the edge of the cage suddenly stood up, raised their heads high, and stared at Jun Moxi with their small cold eyes. The 2 barbarian bulls next to the iron snakes also opened their eyes and looked at Jun Moxi. Jun Moxi's heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly stopped in his tracks. The barbarian bulls looked at him suspiciously, and then lowered their heads. Then, they raised their heads again, and looked around. Finally, they looked at Jun Moxi again, and a look of hope slowly appeared in their eyes. It seemed as if Jun Dashao was some kind of immortal grass, and in short, He was the thing that they longed for the most. The two iron snakes in the distance began to scuttle around in their cages, and their tails were constantly swinging back and forth. The cages began to shake unsteadily, but the eyes of the two snakes were still firmly fixed in the direction of June Moxie, and there was a look of anxiety on their faces. They believed that if they hadn't been confined by the cages, they would have already pounced on him. Jun Wui was watching from the side, and although he also noticed that something was strange, he couldn't see why this was happening. It seemed that his nephew was no different from a normal person. Jun Moxie calmly took 2 steps back, and although his face was still expressionless, his heart was already filled with ecstasy. If he still didn't understand at this point, then he was really more stupid than a pig. Whether it was the art of unlocking heaven's fortune or the exquisite Hongjun pagoda, either one or both of them had an inexplicable effect on Xian beasts, and this effect was very big. Just this discovery alone was already a priceless treasure for Jun Moxie. What was the most dangerous place in the Xian continent? He believed that as long as this question was asked, no one would say that it was the Silver Blizzard City. Although the Silver Blizzard City was powerful and insufferably arrogant, but they wouldn't kill people for no reason. However, there was one place that would, and that was the most dangerous place in the continent. And there was no one who didn't know about this place. Everyone, even the ordinary people, would give the answer: Tian Fa Forest. The Xian beast's paradise, and the human's hell. Even if the great master Shen Xian had reached the peak of his strength, he would still be in danger of losing his life in there. But Jun Moxie wasn't afraid now. What did this mean? What was the most valuable thing in the Xian continent? High-grade medicinal herbs, miraculous healing medicines, miraculous fruits that could increase Xian Qi, Xian Beast Xian Dan, and Xian Beast Cubs. And where could these rare items be found the most? The answer was still, Tian Fa Forest. No one had dared to venture into this place for tens of thousands of years, so how could there be a lack of such rare treasures? Jun Mo Xia possessed a special aura that could make high-level Xian beasts fond of him. So, this aura was like a golden road for him. Moreover, it was also a road that could allow him to rapidly increase his strength. Jun Moxie didn't believe that even Xian Qi could be rapidly increased by relying on medicinal herbs and Xian Dan. Wouldn't his own art of unlocking heaven's fortune have a faster method of increasing it? As if sensing Jun Moxie's agitated emotions, the exquisite Hongjun pagoda in his mind began to spin. This time, Jun Moxie had a strange feeling in his heart, as if he was being despised, or rather, ridiculed. It was like someone carrying a mountain made entirely of gold on his back to beg for food, and along the way, everyone was laughing at him to their heart's content. This feeling that welled up from the bottom of his heart made Jun Moxie very unhappy. Could it be that there was something wrong with my way of thinking? But Jun Moxie really didn't know that there was something wrong with his way of thinking, and it was a very big problem. In fact, he was no different from a beggar who was holding a golden rice bowl, or even worse. This #1 assassin in his previous life, a martial arts expert, was actually a standard newbie who had never come into contact with cultivation. And this standard newbie had received the blessing of the heavens, and possessed the world's #1 spiritual treasure, the exquisite Hongjun pagoda. If this pagoda had 10,000 functions, then the one that Jun Moxie had discovered now was probably not even one. Guarding a mountain of treasures, but not knowing how to excavate them, this was the greatest tragedy. If one had to compare, then Jun Moxie wasn't just holding a golden rice bowl to beg for food, he was holding a diamond bowl, or even the most expensive bowl to beg for food. Even if he had casually read a few cultivation novels in his previous life, he probably wouldn't have had such a small harvest like this. But the only books that this great assassin had read were the works of Jin Yong. So my friends, you are very fortunate. At least more fortunate than Jun Moxie. If my brothers and sisters had been able to cross over with the Hongjun pagoda, at least they would have been much better off than the current Jun Moxie. Therefore, the Hongjun pagoda naturally despised him, for there were too many reasons. There were countless reasons to despise him until death. The moment the Hongjun pagoda began to rotate, almost all the Xian beasts in the cages simultaneously became active, even the level 1, 2, and 3 Xian beasts were no exception. They stared at Jun Moxie, and constantly banged their cages, as if they couldn't wait to rush out of their cages and throw themselves into June Moxie's embrace. Jun Wui was inexplicably staring at this scene with his eyes wide open. What's going on? Did my nephew do something? It seems that since my nephew came here, he only walked back and forth, and didn't do anything, but why are the Xian beasts reacting so strangely? What's going on? Chapter 141. The corners of Jun Moxie's mouth hooked up into a complacent smile. He waved his hand and said, "Invite him in. And, there's another experimenter." Then, he said, "Dispose of these." He pointed at the iron cages and said, "They're no longer useful." The servants hurriedly complied. Several people quickly came over and removed the big iron cages. "These are all useless." Jun Wui widened his eyes and looked at his nephew. "And, yes, they are indeed useless." Jun Moxie smiled as if it was a matter of course. "Third uncle can dispose of them by himself." Third uncle, if you want to slaughter those 2 snakes and eat their meat, count me in. Those snakes are very nutritious and can nourish the body. Slaughter them and eat their meat?" Jun Wui's eyebrows twitched. He almost opened his mouth to reprimand him. These mystical beasts were bought at a huge price of several 100,000 taels of silver. Last night, I ordered them to be bought immediately. But this morning, I walked 2 steps like a military parade, and now I don't need them anymore. Especially that pair of 5th-grade iron-bone snakes. They were a pair, and they were intact. I spent a whole 200,000 taels of silver on them. Just looking at them and you want to eat their meat, a meal costs 200,000 taels of silver? Before he could reprimand him, a rumbling sound rang out, like a magnificent army with thousands of horses and thousands of men. 7 sturdy men, like iron towers, escorted Dugu Xiaoyi, who looked like a snow lotus, into the hall. Under the contrast of her 7 brothers, Dugu Xiaoyi looked even more beautiful today. She was elegant, refined, and dazzling. Her black hair was slightly fluffy and tied up with a sparkling and translucent hairpin. On the hairpin, there were 3 small pearls slowly rippling. Her small face was snow-white and delicate. She had a pair of phoenix eyes and a jade-like nose. Her cherry lips carried a mischievous and pleasing craftiness. She faintly revealed a bit of happiness and shyness. She was wearing a snow-white shawl and a light green dress. On her slender waist, a snow-white jade pendant gently swayed. Although the young girl's figure was still a little immature, and had not developed to the extent of being hot, her curves were still graceful and exquisite. The little girl stood at the door, her clothes fluttering in the breeze. Under the rising sun, she looked like someone who didn't belong to this world. Her beautiful eyes looked at Jun Moxie intentionally and unintentionally. The 1,000 kinds of amorous feelings of a young girl in the prime of her youth were like the most moving scenery in the world. Jun Mo Xia couldn't help but be absent-minded for a moment, even though he had the ability to remain calm even if Tai collapsed in front of him. "What are you looking at? Haven't you seen a beauty before?" Duguin growled in a very displeased manner. His tall and sturdy body took a step forward, directly blocking Jun Moxie's line of sight. It was as if Jun Moxie would see his little sister disappear if he looked at her. "So Brother Dugu is here too. Why don't we drink a little more? We have good wine." Jun Moxie squinted his eyes. Duguing immediately glared at him. "What do you mean drink a little more? You've been cheated once. I'm warning you, brat, you better behave this time and don't look for trouble." "Humph." He snorted heavily as he said this, his expression very strange. It turned out that when Dugu Xiaoyi returned home last night, she was naturally worried about the 7 brothers that Yi Gahan said had been taken down by Jun Moxie. She hurriedly went to visit them. When she entered the door, the 7 tall and sturdy men were squatting in front of the dining table eating porridge. The pot that was too big to feed a bear was already overturned. This couldn't be blamed on them for being rice buckets. It was just that these 7 people's stomachs had almost been burnt through by Jun Moxie's wine. For the next few days, they absolutely couldn't eat anything that was not easy to digest, not even something that was slightly greasy. These 7 fellows, who normally couldn't live without meat and wine, were already complaining incessantly. They were hungry. If these burly men could only eat porridge for 3 meals a day, it was simply terrifying just thinking about it. Ah! How did June Moxie torture you? How did you lose so much weight? We haven't seen each other for a few days. Quickly tell this little sister will stand up for you. The moment Dugu Xiaoyi saw this, she felt distressed. She was extremely shocked to see that all 7 of her brothers seemed to have lost a lot of weight. But her words immediately caused the 7 burly men to feel disgusted. Heroes and legends rushed forward, but at the same time, they felt uncomfortable in their hearts. What? What do you mean by June Moxie tortured us? That brat thinks he can torture us? What a joke. That day, we clearly subdued that brat. If we hadn't been greedy for a few cups, we wouldn't have ended up like this, even if that wine was really good. Bah, that brat June Moxie. Humph, that day, your 3rd brother slapped him down. With that small physique of his, he wants to torture us. Wahaha, Xiaoyi must be joking, right? You still want to stand up for us? Stand up for that brat. Dugu Hao grinned. That's right, 6th brother, even stomped on that brat. That brat cried out in pain, so 6th brother, kicked him fiercely. If it wasn't for Grandpa June's face, 6th brother would have crushed him to death. He. Dugu Shang shamelessly raised his head and boasted. Then why did I hear that all of you were defeated by June Moxie? The one who told me this news is a peerless expert. The 7 brothers were all idiots. None of them could see that their precious little sister was frowning. So, for my sake, he suffered so much, but he didn't say a single word. I was still angry at him just now. With June Moxie's ability, how could he defeat all 7 of us? This is a rumor, a blatant rumor. Dugu Xiong boasted shamelessly as he stood up. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing his thick and hairy arms. Exerting strength, his muscles bulged. Xiaoyi, you actually believe this kind of rumor? It must be that brat June Moxie was defeated by us brothers. His heart is unwilling, but he can't do anything to us. So, he can only use this kind of rumor to comfort himself. That's right. This rumor is too good. 3 people make a tiger. Not only did we beat June Emosia up that day, but we also nearly tore down the June family's mansion. If it weren't for those jars. Dugu Jie had barely finished his sentence when Dugu Chong covered his mouth with his hand. The 7 brothers beamed with joy as they boasted. The more they boasted, the more they felt that this was how things should be. The more they boasted, the prouder they became. In the end, they boasted so much that even they were intoxicated by their lies. It was as if June Dashao had really been taught a lesson by them. He didn't do anything to me, you actually treated him like this, his body is so weak, how could he bear it? How could you do this? The more Dugu Xiaoyi heard, the angrier she got. The more she heard, the more her heart ached. Suddenly, she started sobbing. How could you bear to do this? Too much boasting. The 7 brothers looked at each other in dismay. All 7 of them had the same awkward expression on their faces. Their 14 large eyes were filled with the same expression. What is this? Our stomachs are about to be punctured. Can't you just let us talk freely? Dugu Xiaoyi cried and stamped her feet. She whimpered, You are too ruthless, boo-hoo. I don't want to talk to you anymore. I hate you, boo-hoo. She suddenly turned around and ran away while crying. What's going on? Duguing was confused as he looked at his brothers. I don't know. The remaining 6 were also confused. They shook their heads at the same time. Then, they uniformly turned their heads to the left, and then to the right. Then, Dugu Wudi saw his daughter run out crying because of his sons and nephews. His anger was immediately ignited. He aggressively kicked the door open, grabbed the 7 brothers, and gave them another beating. When they heard that Dugu Xiaoyi wanted to go to the Jun family's residence, the Dugu family didn't oppose it. What a joke! They couldn't wait to separate these two. But now, they want to deliver themselves to their doorstep. How could this be? Therefore, Dugu Xiaoyi brought out her invincible coquettishness. She acted like a spoiled child. Then, she sobbed and sniffled. Tears dripped down her face. Thus, all 3 generations of the Dugu family surrendered. However, he also put forward a condition: he could go, but he must be accompanied by a group of relatives and friends, the 7 brothers. As a result, Dugu Xiaoyi's solo outings suddenly turned into a huge entourage, and the momentum was huge. With a whooshing sound, Little White leapt out and landed on the ground. Shaking his white fur, he turned his head and looked at Duguing with an unfriendly expression. Letting out 2 fierce whines, he then proceeded with his unfinished business. With a whooshing sound, he quickly plunged into Jun Imo Xie's bosom and stretched out his paws, whining twice before lying down with a peace of mind. Even though the little fellow was still a Xian beast cub and had yet to fully mature, it could even be said that it had yet to start developing. However, the arrogance of a high-level Xian beast in its bones was not one bit less. That big guy actually dared to block my way to get close to a good person. This is intolerable. If I hadn't grown up, I would have bitten off your penis. I'll let you know how powerful this big guy is. Jun Imo Xie affectionately held Little White in his arms, and extended his hand to greet the guests. Then, he hastily called for the servants to serve him tea. This was the first time that he had willingly held the little guy. The little guy seemed very excited, and kept crawling around in his arms. He sniffed here and there, and was very busy. Jun Moxie looked at Dugu Xiaoyi with a smile. Miss Dugu is so beautiful today. I can't take my eyes off you. Dugu Xiaoyi's face lit up. She pouted coquettishly. You know what beauty is. Humph, I thought you didn't see it. But in her heart, she was grumbling. Why did he call me Miss Dugu? He's treating me like an outsider. Why didn't he call me little girl? How pleasing to the ear. Jun Moxie hastily laughed. No, no, no. He started to circulate his energy. At the same time, he immersed his spiritual sense into his sea of consciousness. Then, his spiritual sense shot into the Hongjun pagoda like an arrow. With Little White in his hands, he naturally wanted to test it out. This was the first time that Jun Moxie had used his spiritual sense to activate the Hongjun pagoda when it hadn't risen on its own. Boom! Chapter 142. Today's third update has arrived. Exhausted, I'm begging for monthly votes and recommendation votes. The moment Jun Imo Xie's spiritual sense came into contact with the Hongjun pagoda, and the Hongjun pagoda flew into the air, the little creature's drooping ears suddenly straightened up with a flutter sound. A small head suddenly lifted up, and its adorable big eyes actually looked a little serious at this moment, but there was also an indescribable sense of surprise. 9 people sat in a circle in Jun Moxie's courtyard. Dugu Xiaoyi forcibly sat next to Jun Moxie in the name of taking care of Little White. As an elder, Jun Wui sat peacefully in his wheelchair and did not participate in the gathering of the younger generation, only intentionally looking over. The 7 brothers of the Dugu family had bragged and fooled themselves in front of their younger sister. After all, the former had suffered a big loss at the hands of Jun Moxie. If these 7 people were to attack Jun Moxie recklessly, it would not be easy to deal with them. However, Jun Wuyi's third master Jun was sitting next to him. And, the 7 brothers were very well behaved. In fact, they looked like 7 well-behaved children. They were the direct descendants of Dugu Zongheng and Dugu Wudi, the 2 troublemakers. The former had suffered a big loss at the hands of Jun Dashao, so why were they so quiet today? This was the so-called, a man's reputation is like a tree's shadow. The Dugu brothers had heard about the legends of the Jun family's 3 heroes from their grandfather, father, and uncle when they were young, and had even heard about them after they joined the army themselves. So, they could recite them like the back of their hands. White General Jun Wu Hui, Iron-Blooded God of War Jun Wu Meng, Blood General Junwui. The fame of these three men and their legendary deeds had spread far and wide in the army. In fact, they had become legends among the soldiers of Tianxiang. In fact, Old Man Dugu had said, "How can that old man Jun Zhantian have such an outstanding son? Only I can have such a good son." Their father, uncle, and Dugu Wudi had always hated it when others said that someone was stronger than them. Only when these three brothers were mentioned would they become speechless. Don't judge Jun Wui by his quiet and lonely demeanor. But they knew that if Jun Wui were to go crazy, his craziness would be no less than that of his two brothers. When Jun Wu Hui and Jun Wu Meng died mysteriously, Jun Wu Yi stood up with his sword and brazenly dispatched his troops. He changed his previous style of planning before taking action. In 10 days, he commanded his army to traverse 1,500 miles. 10 battles, 10 victories, and 10 victories. He was invincible. He destroyed 9 cities of the Yutang Empire as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. He slaughtered the Yutang Empire's army of 200,000 like he was chopping melons and vegetables. He took the lead in every battle, and the name of the blood-cloaked general spread throughout the world from that battle. It was not until the army had advanced 300 miles into the Yutang Empire that they were stopped by their old enemy, Zhao Jianhun, and the two sides began to fight in a bloody battle. Zhao Jianhun was defeated 3 times in a row, but although he was not discouraged, it was clear that he was no match for the enemy. However, at the last moment, Jun Wui was suddenly attacked by a mysterious master, and once again followed in the footsteps of his 2 older brothers, a great general of a generation, crippled to this day. However, that battle had been recognized by the entire world as the one that had brought glory to the Tianxiang Empire. Advancing like a hurricane, the iron army of hundreds of thousands directly advanced into the enemy's country. A lone army penetrating deep into enemy territory, 10 battles and 10 victories. This unprecedented feat had long since become a legend. Although Jun Wui had to leave the army due to a medical condition, but the name of the blood-cloaked general was still regarded as an idol of the military, and the legend had become more and more popular. Everyone who talked about that battle couldn't help but be enraptured, and their blood was boiling. When the 7 brothers of the Dugu family had accompanied Dugu Xiaoyi, they had been warned by Dugu Wudi, "You must never, ever provoke Jun Wui. You must never, ever, ever provoke Jun Wui." In the entire Tianxiang Empire, only the Dugu family would dare to openly oppose the Jun family. And the Dugu family's Dugu Wudi had the courage to beat up Jun Imoxia, so much so that he even had the courage to kill Jun Imoxia. So, the Jun family also had the courage to do the same to the Dugu family. And that person was Jun Wui. If Jun Wui were to go berserk, and cut the 7 descendants of the Dugu family into pieces, then even Dugu Wudi would not think that it would be an accident. This kind of thing, according to Jun Wui's character in the past, was completely possible, and would also have the courage to do it. Jun Wui was an idol in the hearts of the 7 brothers, and they were the heroes and legends of the past. They might have been able to show off their strength in front of Jun Moxie, but in front of Jun Wui, they were more obedient than a child. But then again, Third Master Jun really wasn't looking at them right now. In recent years, he had cultivated his mind, and his bearing was no longer the same as it was in the past. Killing the 7 Dugu brothers in one go was something that Jun Wui couldn't do. But while Third Master Jun couldn't do it, it didn't mean that no one would dare to do it. The person that Third Master Jun was looking at was his precious nephew, Jun Moxie. Third Master Jun felt that the more he understood this nephew, the more mysterious he felt. Jun Dashao's ruthless methods of killing people with a flick of his fingers had become a norm. In all honesty, with the strength that Jun Moxie had displayed, the 7 Dugu brothers would die in a moment if both sides were to fight, and no one would have a chance to survive. With Third Master Jun's understanding of his nephew, if the Dugu brothers didn't open their eyes, then Jun Dashao would really dare to make a move, and that would be a serious matter. Therefore, Third Master Jun could only sit there, and observe the situation from afar, and prevent any accidents from happening. But it was obvious that the thing that Third Master Jun was afraid of would not happen. Because, Jun Dashao's current state was quite unusual. Not to mention his third uncle, the Dugu siblings, and the others, he couldn't even feel his own existence. There was no other reason than that he was in a very dangerous and unusual situation. In order to verify his own judgment, he had forcibly stimulated the Hongjun Pagoda with his own consciousness. Within the world of his consciousness, the Hongjun Pagoda was stimulated, and rose into the air, and rotated at high speed. An endless stream of spiritual qi gushed out from the Hongjun Pagoda, and did not stop for a long time. Instead, the spiritual qi became more and more concentrated, and in the end, it turned into a blazing white light. Jun Moxie had never imagined that such a situation would occur. He only felt that all the tendons and meridians in his body were full to the point of bursting, swelling to the point of bursting. It was as if his body was in danger of exploding from the surging spiritual qi at any time. He was so shocked that he no longer cared about where he was, and concentrated on using the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, absorbing the spiritual qi that had just gushed into his tendons and meridians. For a moment, Jun Moxie could even hear the sound of the spiritual qi passing through his tendons and meridians. What made him most shocked was that the moment his consciousness pierced into the Hongjun Pagoda, it suddenly became one with the Hongjun Pagoda. It became inseparable, and he couldn't withdraw it even if he wanted to. Junior Leopard let out a cry of ecstasy. Junior Leopard cried out in ecstasy. His 4 little paws firmly hugged Jun Imo-sia. Even his little mouth and belly were pressed against Jun Imo-sia's body. Junior Leopard closed his eyes and absorbed the heaven and earth aura from Jun Imo-sia's body with a satisfied look on his face. "You're really a good man, giving me so much pure spiritual qi. Good man, I'll never leave you again." These were Junior Leopard's thoughts. All of this happened within Jun Moxie's body. Apart from Jun Dashao and Junior Leopard, who didn't understand human language, there wasn't much unusual. To outsiders, Jun Moxie was still sitting quietly with an enigmatic smile, and no one would notice anything unusual. However, not much unusual didn't mean that there was absolutely nothing unusual. At the moment when the Hongjun Pagoda flew up, Dugu Xiaoyi, who was the closest to Jun Moxie and was paying attention to Dashao's every move, was the first to notice something unusual. Almost at the same time, the Gudu's 7 brothers also noticed something unusual. At this moment, Dugu Xiaoyi and her 7 brothers had the same feeling. Although Jun Moxie was sitting in front of them, it was as if they were thousands of miles apart. He was obviously sitting in front of them, but they felt that the person in front of them was just an illusion, illusory and unreal, like a mass of air. Although they knew that it existed objectively, they couldn't touch it. In an instant, the 8 of them felt as if they were dreaming. This kind of strange feeling was extremely mysterious. It was like the bright moon in the sky at night, seemingly within reach, but also unattainable and untouchable. At the same time, Jun Wui, who was sitting far away, suddenly raised his eyebrows, and 2 sharp rays of light shot out from his tiger-like eyes. He looked at Jun Moxie in disbelief. As a Tianxian expert, he could clearly feel an inconceivably strong power slowly emanating from Jun Moxie's body, and gradually overflowing into the heaven and earth. The scorching sun and autumn wind in the sky seemed to have come to a complete standstill at this moment. The spiritual qi that was scattered in all directions seemed to have turned into a spiritual qi storm as it violently surged towards the Jun residence. Then, it formed a spiritual qi whirlpool above the Jun residence that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. Then, it rumbled as it pressed down. There wasn't a trace of wind in the sky, but in the courtyard of Jun Moxie, all the flowers and trees in the surroundings suddenly fell in the opposite direction with a rustling sound. And the Naiwan Palace on top of Jun Moxie's head was the center of this storm. Although the spiritual qi in the sky couldn't be seen by anyone, but it was majestic and orderly, and was slowly pressing down in an enormous manner. In the midst of the silence, there seemed to be a shio-shio sound echoing from the depths of everyone's soul, as if something was rotating at a high speed, at a speed that no one had ever seen or even heard of before. Jun Wui knew that something was wrong, and this matter couldn't be seen by outsiders. So, he made a prompt decision, and pressed his hands on his wheelchair. His whole body flew up with a shwa sound, and flew over the 8 Dugu siblings like a big bird. Bang! 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 He struck out 8 times at lightning speed, and knocked the 8 siblings unconscious in an instant. How could the 8 Dugu siblings be a match for an expert like Tian Xian? So, they naturally fell unconscious in response, and didn't even have the slightest reaction. Chapter 143. That violent spiritual chi had already silently formed a huge tornado. Although it couldn't be seen, it could definitely be felt. Its power was so great that it could kill many people. Apart from Jun Imo Xia, who was the instigator of this, the others were bound to be turned into ashes the moment it landed. Even Jun Wui, a Tian Xian expert, might not be able to escape. Du Guing and the others were not aware of this impending danger because their Xian Qi was weak. However, Jun Wui was a genuine Tian Xian expert. How could he not be aware of it? Therefore, he made a prompt decision to knock them unconscious and take them away. He did not even hesitate to use his full strength to stake it all on this one throw. Because he was afraid that if he was a step too late, he would only be able to save a few of them. Then, the rest of them would not be able to escape. Therefore, Jun Wui could only take them away in one go. Even if he had to expose his own strength, he would not hesitate. However, Jun Wui was also certain that the Dugu siblings' strength would not be able to move even if they were aware that he was the one who took action. Following Jun Wui's departure, a deep footprint was left on the hard stone ground by his footsteps. The blue light still shone brightly. Almost at the same time that Jun Wui's figure had just left the small courtyard, the spiritual qi in the sky suddenly began to crazily press down. The tip of the spiritual qi formed a high-speed rotating cone, and fell directly on Jun Moxi's Baihui acupoint. At the same time, the Hongjun pagoda in his spiritual space emitted a buzzing sound. The pagoda's body instantly enlarged by several times, and countless rays of golden light shot out from it. A wisp of pure spiritual qi formed a blazing white light, and pierced upwards with an unstoppable momentum. Its target was also Jun Moxi's Baihui acupoint. Jun Imo Xia's motionless body suddenly trembled violently, and his face twitched. His Baihui acupoint had suddenly opened up under the attack from both the inside and the outside. A smooth road had opened up between the outside world and the Hongjun pagoda. The overwhelming amount of spiritual qi seemed to have unscrupulously opened up a passageway through Jun Imo Xia's Baihui acupoint. After the Hongjun pagoda's attack, the spiritual qi quickly converged, and like a whale sucking in water, it completely absorbed the surging spiritual qi. The huge amount of spiritual qi that had gathered in the outside world completely disappeared in a few breaths. However, Jun Moxi's body had yet to calm down. The Hongjun pagoda's output of spiritual qi did not slow down at all. After swallowed, the spiritual qi from heaven and earth continuously poured into his qi again, then rotated, disappeared, and was absorbed again. Little Leopard was in Jun Moxi's arms. For him, the little spiritual qi that leaked out from Jun Moxi was enough. What's more, this was the purest spiritual qi in the world, especially after it had been filtered by the Hongjun pagoda. So at this moment, the little thing's benefits were incomparable. At this moment, it seemed as if the snow-white fur on its body was about to shine. It cried out in pain, but it seemed to realize that this was a great opportunity. It forced itself to endure the pain. The bones in its body cracked, and then the white fur on its body fell off, leaving only a small red ball of flesh. Even its eyelashes and beard fell off. After a while, Little White whimpered again. Its tiny meatball-like body continuously trembled in pain, and at a speed visible to the naked eye, a layer of snow-white fur rapidly grew on its body. The fur was long and elegant, and it was even longer than its original fur. The joints in his body crackled like beans being fried. Little White slowly relaxed its body, opened its eyes, and propped up its 4 little paws from Jun Moxi's body. It looked at its own body with indescribable joy, and then excitedly ran around Jun Moxi's body. It stopped after running around 5 or 6 times, and then lowered its head. Its little tongue lovingly licked its newly grown fur, and its expression was one of contentment. As Jun Moxi's body underwent a huge change, and the spiritual qi in the world began to move in an abnormal manner, the entire Tianxiang city's super experts looked out of the window in shock. Such a huge change in the world, how could they not be shocked? All the experts broke the windows and doors at the same time, and watched in amazement as the huge spiritual chi vortex suddenly disappeared without a trace. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, and thought, what kind of cultivation does it take to create such an earth-shattering movement? Invisibly, the spiritual chi vortex covered a radius of dozens of miles, and in the hearts of these experts, it had already become a special forbidden area. Even if it was the great master Shenxian, they would not have the courage to explore such a terrifying existence. Even though everyone's heart was extremely curious, but no one had the courage to take the first step. This was a pressure that could disdain the world. In the face of such pressure, even if it was the peak of the great master Shenxian, it was afraid that he would be nothing more than an ant. In the magnificent jewel hall, an old man with white hair and beard came out of the window, and quietly stood on the roof of the magnificent jewel hall. After a while, two people dressed in white landed beside him. It was Mu Shuetong and Xiao Han. This level of skill, I'm afraid that he has already surpassed the level of the great master Shenxian. The ninth elder's face was full of shock and sadness. I didn't think that there would be such a strong existence in the Tianxiang city. Xiao Han and Mu Shuetong were shocked and asked, Ninth elder, is this person actually so strong? Is there a higher realm above the great master Shenxian? Strong? The ninth elder gently shook his head, his face was dignified, and his eyes were dignified. The word strong is not enough to describe this person. As for a higher realm, with your current strength, it's best that you don't know. The ninth elder's eyes were full of fear. It flashed and then disappeared. Mu Shuetong and Xiao Han's complexion changed at the same time. Outside the city, three groups of people were hurrying towards the Tianxiang city, and almost at the same time, the team issued an order to come to a screeching halt. From the Silver Blizzard City's team, the little princess, who was wearing a veil, jumped down and asked, Third Elder, why did you stop? Aren't we going to reach our destination if we go a bit further? The third elder and the sixth elder both felt the earth-shattering aura in the distance, and looked at each other, only to see the shock in each other's eyes. The sixth elder sucked in a breath of cold air, stroked his beard, and said in a heavy tone, the previous movement was obviously not a fight between more than one person, but if it was caused by only one person, then this movement is too frightening. What kind of person has such frightening strength, and what kind of trouble has the ninth elder caused this time? Third elder, if this person is also causing this movement for the sake of the Xian Dan. He paused, shook his head, and smiled bitterly, then, we might be sending sheep into the tiger's mouth. The third elder's frosty eyebrows wrinkled tightly. If such an existence is only a tiger, then do you think that we have the qualifications to be sheep? Perhaps only a dragon, a divine dragon whose head can be seen but not its tail can be compared to it. The sixth elder remained silent for a long time, and then said, Third elder, I've traveled the world my entire life, and today is the first time I've seen such a terrifying existence. I'm afraid that even a great master wouldn't be able to compare. The third elder sighed, and said, I've also never seen such a person, and I feel that this person is even stronger than a great master. However, this is not necessarily a bad thing. This person's strength has already far surpassed our generation, and I believe that even a level 9 Xian core might not be able to enter his eyes. I think that perhaps this person has been living in seclusion in the Tianxiang city for a long time, and has been constantly coming to the Tianxiang city to stir up trouble, which might have annoyed this person. Perhaps this person doesn't want to act rashly, and has released his imposing aura in order to deter the heroes. If there is such a person in the Tianxiang city, then we must be very careful after entering the city. We mustn't make the slightest mistake, and we mustn't act rashly. Otherwise, I'm afraid that we won't be able to return to the Silver Blizzard City for the rest of our lives. Yes. Third Elder's words make sense, and we'll do as Third Elder says. The sixth elder frowned. Generally, such a person wouldn't exist in a powerful family, and should be hiding in the streets, so, that's right, it's exactly like that. As I just said, regarding the Xian core, even if it's a level 9 Xian core, for such an existence, it doesn't have any meaning. His appearance shouldn't be because of the Xian Dan. The third elder's eyes shone with extreme excitement. If we have the fate to meet such a strong person, then we'll certainly be able to obtain great benefits. Even if we have to give up one or more Xian Dan, it's absolutely worth it as long as we have the opportunity to meet such a person. The sixth elder shuddered at first, but then nodded with an excited look on his face, and said, "That's right, there is nothing else in this secular world that can interest us. Glory, splendor, wealth, high positions, marquises, what are they to us? Even if it's a level 9 Xian core, it can't give us what we truly want. I just don't know what this senior's temper is like, such a strong person, I'm afraid." The two old men's eyes were fervently staring at the distant Tianxiang city walls, and the look in their eyes was getting more and more passionate. The imperial advisor of the Yutang Empire, Fei Mengchen, suddenly stopped in her tracks, and looked at the Tianxiang city, her expression gradually becoming gloomy. "I didn't think that there would be such a strong person in the Tianxiang Empire. Is the great master Shen Xian at the peak? Or perhaps he's an even higher existence? It seems that there are many things in this world that are beyond my understanding." Zhao Jianhun was riding on his horse, and his sharp eyes were looking straight ahead as Lengling asked, "Is the imperial advisor rejoicing?" Although Zhao Jianhun was also a famous general, but his Xian Qi cultivation was not very high, and although he was aware of the slight changes in the world, but he didn't understand what these changes meant, or it could be said that his level was simply stuck at a lower level. Fei Mengchen's face was extremely gloomy, and her eyes were slightly closed. She was still shocked by the terrifying strength of this peerless master, and was then questioned by Zhao Jianhun. "Zhao Jianhun, are you still suspecting me about Jun Wuhui? Shouldn't I be suspicious? For consecutive inexplicable and humiliating victories. However, it was during those delicate times that you, as the imperial preceptor, were not in the imperial capital. May I ask, where did you go during that time?" Zhao Jianhun's face was expressionless. "If I was facing the enemy head-on, then as long as I had the opportunity to kill Jun Wuhui, I would not hesitate to do so. But 4 times in a row, they were defeated by the enemy first, and then at the last moment, the enemy's commander died or was crippled. Then, they won the battle inexplicably." Zhao Jianhun suppressed his anger, and growled in a low voice, "The entire continent is saying that Zhao Jianhun is a lucky general." Lucky general? Do you understand the meaning of these words, imperial advisor? Dog shit luck. Dog shit luck. Chapter 144. Is personal honor more important than the people of the country? Fei Mengchen's white eyebrows twitched. Personal honor? This is a soldier's honor. Zhao Jianhun laughed bitterly. "That's right, why am I telling you this? You don't understand at all. You're an important figure in the imperial court. You don't need to know what a soldier's honor is, you only care about the results, right?" Fei Mengchen laughed in exasperation and pointed at Tianxiang City. "Didn't you notice it just now? Even if your level of strength is relatively low, you should still be aware that if such a strong person were to participate in the war, then the Tianxiang Empire will be able to unify the entire continent in a very short time. This is undoubtedly a calamity for us. What is a soldier's honor? I naturally know this, but a soldier's honor is not the same as being pedantic. Not to mention that I did not kill Jun Wuhui. Even if I did, for the sake of Yutang, I have a clear conscience." Zhao Jianhun's back straightened like a javelin, and Lengling said, "A clear conscience? When has a despicable person who only knows how to stab people in the back ever had a clear conscience? Right and wrong will be judged by the public." Fei Mengchen was flabbergasted by his words. What kind of person is this? I've never seen such a stubborn person. Every time this issue is brought up, this old man has already explained it for 10 years and you still don't believe me. In the direction of the Tian Fa forest, a group of savage-like soldiers were marching out of the Tian Fa forest, one step at a time. Everyone in this team was dressed in rags. At best, they only had rags hanging on their bodies. Some of them only had a piece of animal skin wrapped around their crotch. Everyone's body was covered in crisscrossing scars. There were no less than dozens of scars, and the original color of their skin could not be seen clearly. From these scars, it could be seen that each of them had wandered on the edge of life and death many times. There were also a few people whose legs were obviously injured. They limped when they walked, but every step they took was firm. They refused to be supported by their companions and dragged their bodies, but they did not fall behind. They did not even need crutches. Although their bodies were tired, their spirits were high. Their eyes were filled with sharpness and wildness, and their muscles were bulging. Hundreds of people walked together. Even though they were in such a sorry state, they naturally exuded a sharp killing intent. No one dared to look him in the eye. Everyone was carrying a large bundle on their back. Even those who were heavily injured were no exception. Every time their hands touched these bundles, a trace of pride would flash across their faces. Obviously, the things on their backs were the spoils of war that they had obtained with their own hands. Step by step, they walked towards the direction of the Tianxiang city. Although their pace was slow, it was steady. Although there was an incomparable urgency in their eyes, their footsteps were still steady. These people were the 300 Jun family guards that Jun Moxie had exiled to the Tianfa forest to undergo death training. After a few short months, if they were or in the past, then they had now been refined into steel. If they were steel in the past, then now, they had transformed into sharp killing weapons that showed off their abilities. Behind them, in the depths of the Tianfa forest, two black silhouettes streaked across the sky with a sharp whistling sound, and flew towards the Tianxiang city at an extremely fast speed. No one could clearly see whether these two silhouettes were people or something else. They could only see two black silhouettes, and then disappeared in a flash. Jun Moxie only felt that the moment the spiritual qi penetrated his body, his meridians suddenly began to swell, filling up his meridians in an instant. The qi flowing through his meridians suddenly burst, but then disappeared like a bottomless hole, sucked away by the Hongjun pagoda. After a moment of silence, the qi returned like a raging tide, and the Hongjun pagoda temporarily stopped its output of spiritual qi. The qi flowing through his meridians had actually grown a lot stronger in this short period of time, and had also condensed a lot. His meridians already felt full. Right now, Jun Moxie had already reached the bottleneck of the first stage of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. All he needed was an opportunity, and he would be able to enter the second stage in one go. For a cultivation technique like the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, this kind of progress was simply a miracle that even the gods and Buddhas could not believe. Right now, Jun Moxie's true strength, if measured by the Xian Qi standards of the Xian continent, had already broken through the 9th level barrier, and had broken through to the middle level of the silver level. But in terms of the effectiveness and applicability of his cultivation technique, even the great master Shen Xian would not be able to match up to him. This was equivalent to taking a huge leap forward in an instant, and it was a huge step. In such a short period of time, all the spiritual qi that had been absorbed by the Hongjun pagoda had already entered the Hongjun pagoda. Such a huge amount of spiritual qi had actually been swallowed by the Hongjun pagoda in one gulp. Furthermore, it was like a drop of water had been added into the boundless sea, completely not causing any waves. Although that drop of water was big enough, it was still too small compared to the boundless sea. This was the first time that the Hongjun pagoda had been actively activated by Jun Moxie, and it had actually erupted with such a terrifying power. Just this power alone was enough to make the entire world tremble. Actually, this did not mean that Jun Moxie already possessed some kind of invincible power. It was just that the Hongjun pagoda was a divine object from the ancient times, before the creation of the heavens and earth. Its effects and starting point were naturally ridiculously high. Although Jun Dashao's strength had increased, and it had increased by quite a lot, it was only relative to his original strength. The spiritual qi that had gathered in the air was still being absorbed by the Hongjun pagoda, and the surface of Jun Moxie's small courtyard did not seem to have changed at all. The reason why it was said to be almost was because anyone who was more attentive would be able to feel it the moment they stepped into the courtyard. The entire ground had actually sunk by 3 inches, a whole 3 inches. Furthermore, the jade table that had once been in front of Jun Moxie had already disappeared without a trace. It was as if ice had melted into water without a sound. A pained expression appeared on Jun Moxie's face. He had tried to withdraw his spiritual sense from the Hongjun Pagoda many times, but he actually knew that it was still locked onto the Hongjun Pagoda. Jun Moxie did not understand, so he could only wait patiently and deal with the myriad of changes by remaining unchanged. Suddenly, the interior of the Hongjun Pagoda rumbled, and Jun Moxie only felt a sharp pain in his head. Suddenly, the Hongjun Pagoda slowly fell back to its original position, and the surrounding light disappeared in an instant. At the same time, Jun Moxie suddenly felt that there was suddenly an additional shadow in his mind. The heavens are divided into Qian Kun, and the earth is divided into Yin and Yang. Yin and Yang go through reincarnation, and all living things are born. At the beginning of the human body, it is nothing more than Yin and Yang. Creation is born and creation is gone. Therefore, it can be hidden in Yin and Yang. All living things can be hidden, and so can the human body. Yin-Yang escape. Jun Moxie slowly chewed on this yin-yang escape technique word by word, and slowly comprehended it. He discovered that this so-called yin-yang escape could be said to be a very practical technique. After mastering it, one's body could be hidden in any object in the surroundings at any time, and at any place. If one mastered it to the peak, one could even make one's body invisible in the air. One could travel hundreds of miles in the water, and traverse over mountains and ridges in the earth. What kind of awesome technique was this? The Hongjun Pagoda is indeed not an ordinary object. If only there were more of these things. Jun Moxie sighed in satisfaction. Suddenly, a thought arose in his mind. If I were to become invisible and peep on a beautiful woman bathing, for example, peep on my beautiful sister-in-law, as soon as this thought arose, Jun Moxie suddenly spat out a mouthful of saliva, and scolded, "Jun Moxie, if you die, then so be it. Why do you have to leave behind so many dirty and vulgar thoughts to affect me? This is really intolerable." If the deceased Jun Moxie had known about this after his death, he would certainly have wept bitter tears of grievance. Big brother, this is your own thoughts, okay? It is absolutely your own thoughts, what does it have to do with me? My soul has already flown away, and you still push the blame onto me. Even if you become a human or a ghost, you can't be so shameless. Jun Moxie had never come into contact with cultivation before. In fact, he did not even know what cultivation was. Naturally, he did not know how powerful this yin-yang escape technique was. Since the beginning of time, there had always been only 5 escape techniques: metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Moreover, because the heavens and earth were not complete, the 5 elements were not complete. Furthermore, one had to specialize in one according to one's aptitude and talent. Only then would one have a chance to practice it. And this yin-yang escape technique was based on the number of yin and yang. It was above the heavens and earth. Therefore, it had surpassed the scope of the incomplete heavens and earth. Under the cultivation of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, one would be able to freely conceal oneself at any time and any place once mastered. It was not restricted by the rules of the 5 elements escape techniques. Such a technique, if placed in an ordinary cultivation world, would be enough to cause many people to fight over it. But Jun Moxie did not realize that this technique was so great and rare. He had obtained it from the Hongjun Pagoda, but he felt that it was only right and proper. Instead, he felt that it was too little. If this kind of thinking was made known to the cultivators of other worlds, they would immediately spit out a mouthful of blood and die in grief and indignation. Humans should not be so shameless. Jun Wui appeared in the small courtyard with a face full of shock. He carefully walked over, and his footsteps were uncertain as he stepped on the ground. With his sharp senses after advancing to the level of a Tian Xian expert, he could naturally feel that the ground under his feet had sunk by 3 inches. It did not disappear, but the ground under his feet had become even firmer. How was this possible? How could the ground sink by 3 inches in an instant? What kind of terrifying strength was required? This was not surprising. What was even more strange was that not a single leaf had fallen from the flowers and plants in the garden. Such a violent impact, such a huge movement, and yet not a single leaf had fallen. This was too strange. What was even more surprising was that the jade table that the 8 of them had been sitting on earlier, which was made of a special material and was abnormally sturdy, had also evaporated without a sound. The ground had sunk, the jade table had disappeared, but not a single leaf had fallen. What was going on? How could such an outrageous phenomenon be explained? Chapter 145. Jun Moxie's thoughts returned to his consciousness like a receding tide. He seemed to be in a trance. I'm also very curious. Third uncle, please don't ask me what's going on. I'm also very confused. I don't know what's going on. Jun Wui smiled tolerantly. It can't be a bad thing. Jun Moxie looked at him apologetically and said, it shouldn't be a bad thing. He paused and asked, what about them? I knocked them unconscious. They're still unconscious. Jun Wui sighed, this is very sudden. It's better that they don't know about it. It's indeed very sudden. Third uncle, you've handled it very well. Jun Moxie stood up. The Hongjun Pagoda was related to the greatest secret of his transmigration to this world. At the same time, it was also the greatest reliance he could rely on to protect his life in this strange world. Therefore, he absolutely could not reveal even a little bit of it. Even if it was to his closest kin, he absolutely could not reveal it. Some secrets were destined to be kept to himself for the rest of his life. Only Little White was exceptionally excited. He ran back and forth on Jun Moxie's body as if he was running on flat ground. He was so excited that he didn't know what to do. Occasionally, he would roll a few times in the air. However, he was always very stable. He would never fall to the ground. He would even jump up and grab a strand of Jun Moxie's hair. He would hang on Jun Moxie's body for a while. Jun Moxie helplessly looked at this obviously excited little thing. He frowned and said, this little guy seems to be relying on me. Third uncle, it's all right now. Wake them up later. You should first think about how to explain this so that they won't get suspicious. Jun Wui smiled, but his eyes suddenly fell on Little White's body, and he suddenly stopped talking. His eyes flashed with a look of shock as he blurted out, how is this possible? It actually advanced. How is this possible? It was originally a rank 7 cub, now. Damn! With his eyesight as an expert, Tian Xian could naturally tell that the little fellow was different from before. Finally, he couldn't help but curse. With Jun Wui's personality, it was natural that he was shocked to the extreme when he blurted out these two words. To put it bluntly, even if a living ghost appeared in front of Jun Wui, he might not have lost his composure like this. A high-level Xian beast that was still a cub could actually advance. This was no longer a miracle, but a miracle. You've advanced? Really? Jun Imo Xia grabbed the little thing, and turned it over and over to inspect it despite its protests. Then, he said in a puzzled manner, there's nothing different. This little thing's penis is still so small. Jun Wui was speechless. My good nephew, I really thought that you knew everything. Isn't your argument too funny? Can a Xian beast's advancement be seen just by looking at its penis? The little thing was also angry. It whimpered angrily. No matter how you look at it, it is an existence that is close to a top-level Xian beast. No matter how attached it is to you and how it needs to please you, you can't judge it from head to toe. I despise you. Do you look at the level of a Xian beast? One must know that Xian beasts have their own limits. Their advancement is limited by their innate talent. High-level Xian beasts are especially unable to surpass this iron rule. As for a Xian beast at the peak of 7th level like the iron-winged panther, it can be said that the peak of 7th level is the highest limit of the iron-winged panther. If it wants to advance further, even if it is not absolutely impossible, it is still extremely difficult. In the case of the iron-winged panther, if it wants to make another breakthrough, it must first reach its peak strength when it is still in its prime. This is because once a Xian beast enters its later years, even if its strength reaches the peak of 7th level, it will lose the possibility of advancing due to the deterioration of its body. However, even if the iron-winged panther reaches its peak strength in its prime, It is only a prerequisite for it to have the opportunity to advance. This is because if it really wants to advance, it must obtain the blessing of the heavens and obtain some mysterious opportunities and miraculous treasures. Only then will it have the opportunity to advance. An underage iron-winged panther will not have the opportunity to advance. In fact, most iron-winged panther have to enter their later years before they can reach the peak of 7th level Xian beasts. To be able to reach the peak of 7th level Xian beasts in their prime, it is extremely rare. But at this moment, this fact, this iron rule, has been broken in front of Jun Wui. An iron-winged panther cub that is only 1 month old, who has not even come into contact with the iron-winged panther's innate talent, has actually advanced just like that. Is it because of Jun Moxie? It has only been lying on Jun Moxie's body for a while and it has advanced. During this period of time, no one else has come into contact with this little thing. What kind of concept is this? A miracle? A miracle? This is too big of a change, isn't it? Jun Wui pointed at the little guy. You actually helped it advance, how can such an earth-shattering thing be covered up? Oh my god, I actually saw a 8th level iron-winged panther, cub. Jun Wui was a little driven mad. In fact, although an 8th level iron-winged panther is extremely rare, it does not mean that it does not exist. Even if the chances are slim, there are still some 7th level peak iron-winged panther that manage to advance. But this 8th level iron-winged panther is just a cub. In the history of Xian continent's Xian beasts, this cub may not be the last, but it is definitely unprecedented. So what if he's going to advance? This has nothing to do with me, what do I know? I don't know anything. Jun Moxie had an innocent look on his face as he spread out his hands. It advanced on its own, what has it got to do with me? Who saw that it was my doing? I can only act shamelessly. Jun Wui heaved a heavy sigh and glared fiercely at his nephew. If you continue to be so careless, sooner or later you will be exposed. Ai, this is an 8th level iron-winged panther ah. In truth, even with 3rd Master Jun's character, at this moment, he had the thought of concealing this little thing. After all, this little thing was too precious, and its future was even more limitless. This time it was not an accident. Jun Moxie powerlessly defended himself, feeling somewhat guilty. Jun Dashao was relatively simple-minded. He had already grasped certain characteristics of Xian beasts, and this matter of advancing did not seem to be very difficult. Therefore, he really did not care too much about this little thing, especially since this little thing was related to the little girl. If he could send this god of plagues away as soon as possible, then there would be no need to haggle over this matter. What happened just now? Dugu Ying's eyes turned back and forth. The other 6 people also had the same expression on their faces. Third uncle, why did you hit me? Dugu Ying did not dare to act rashly in front of Jun Wui, and respectfully addressed him as third uncle. This was mainly due to the fact that he had received family discipline since childhood. For the Dugu brothers, there were only 3 men who could hit them, and they did not dare to fight back. The first one was naturally their grandfather, Dugu Zongheng, followed by their father, Uncle Dugu Wudi. No, the second one was Uncle Jun, and the last one was their father, Uncle Dugu Wudi. Hit you? How could that be? You must have drunk too much a few days ago, and I happen to have a jar of wine here. You got drunk as soon as you smelled it and fainted. I guess this is the after effect, how useless. Jun Moxie stared at them, and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He looked at them with extreme disdain. It must have been hard on you. 7 bull-like strong men fainted as soon as they smelled the wine, and fainted at the same time. How rare! The 7 brothers raised their hands at the same time, and scratched their heads in embarrassment. So that's how it is. Jun Wui's movements were too fast, and he had controlled his strength very well. They had only vaguely seen Jun Wui fly up and knock them out, but they had not seen it clearly. Now that they thought about it, their minds were even more chaotic. When they smelled the strong aroma of the wine, they couldn't help but feel a little intoxicated. 7 pairs of eyes looked at the wine jars at the same time. Gulp, Gulp, gulp. The sound of saliva being swallowed rang out, and they immediately forgot about the previous matter. In fact, they did not even notice that the wine jars were not here when they came. As for the table being changed, to these thick-minded brothers, they had no impression of it at all. Only Dugu Xiaoyi would not be fooled. She stared at them with her big round eyes, and was about to question them. Suddenly, Little White jumped out of June Moxie's arms, and climbed all over Dugu Xiaoyi's body, and excitedly made gestures in her hands, meaning, "Master, look, I have advanced." "Waha, and why are you not happy? Didn't you see that Uncle's eyes almost popped out of his eye sockets? Little White is so cute." Dugu Xiaoyi lovingly stroked the little fellow, and her pretty eyes turned into crescent moons. Seeing Little White so happy and lively today, Dugu Xiaoyi was also very happy. Just for this, she did not come in vain today. Little White's show was undoubtedly in vain. Although the little girl was exceptionally intelligent, she was limited by her experience, and did not know what advanced was. In fact, whether Little White was an iron-winged panther, a kitten, or a puppy, it did not make any difference to her. They were all pets to her. "The 7 of you, come with me." Jun Wui pushed his wheelchair. "Let me see what Dugu Wudi has taught you." Dugu Ying and the others looked at each other, and could not help but look excited. From Jun Wui's words, it was clear that he was going to give them pointers. Their fathers and uncles held this third uncle in high esteem. What kind of person was Jun Wui? He was the standard expert of his generation, the invincible blood general, and a legend in the army. Just a casual word of advice from him could benefit him a lot. Dugu Ying and his brothers followed behind Jun Wui, and Dugu Xiong diligently pushed Jun Wui's wheelchair. Dugu Xiong was very careful and gentle, as if he was afraid that it would jolt the third Master Jun. The 7 of them didn't think that it would be inappropriate to leave their little sister alone here. They had even forgotten why they had come here today. Third uncle's charm was really great. These 7 tall and strong men actually followed him. Jun Moxie sighed in his heart. "Miss Dugu, do you still remember that I still owe you a good knife?" Jun Imo Xia said with a smile as he calmly sat down.